In a short while, start this day off, so please, we'll see if some more people can join us in the room also, even though it's always nice to have a talk outside. Please join in. We will start in just a few seconds. Okay, it is 9 o'clock and it's time to start. So good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Jönsson. I'm director for North Sweden European Office. That is the EU office for the 4 northernmost counties of Sweden, being a part of the northern sparsely populated areas network also, and in other words, the European Arctic. Being a partner to the International Polar Foundation and all other regional and national representations making this event. Thanks for the good collaboration to make this happen. Thanks to all Arctic friends, and thanks to all you that are here and all that were here yesterday, and also thanks to Norway Mission for the reception yesterday. And I'm happy to then start the second day off. Arctic is on top of everything, in all possible ways. In the changing world, it is even more important to hear the voices of the Arctic. Luckily, we do have many distinguished speakers here today to tell us the story, and even more so as we start today with the reshuffle compared to the program. So I'm very, very happy to now open the floor for the first keynote that will be held by the Foreign Minister Høgne Højdal to address us from Faroe Islands on the Arctic issues. So please, welcome to stand on the floor, Høgne Højdal, please.
Thank you, Mikael. And dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased in the Faroe Islands that the organizer has placed Arctic security at the forefront on this symposium. And of course, in the dire state of the world of today, it's never more important that we collaborate as partners. And I commend the organizers for placing this critical topic at the top. And I apologize if people have heard this story before, but there was a famous Faroese geographer on our university that once was asked by his pupils, is there any place in the world that is just like the Faroe Islands? In geography, in geology, in resources, in climate, in currents and so on? Well, he said, I will think about it and I'll come back. And 3 weeks later, he came back and said, I have found 3 other places in the world, and they are exactly like the Faroe Islands. Everything is the same. The landscape, geography, the harsh weather and so on, the resources. There's just one critical difference. People actually live in the Faroe Islands. And I think this goes for our whole Arctic region. The people actually live in the Arctic region and have managed to build up sustainable modern societies. And this is the most critical issue in our approach to security in the Arctic. What I would call the democratic sustainability of the challenges of the world and the Arctic today. That the people and the nations in the Arctic are partners in everything that happens in the Arctic, because the Arctic is, of course, the Arctic issues are, of course, the issues of the world today. And as seen from the Arctic, security in a broad sense is our main approach. Not only the increased tension also in our part of the world, how can we maintain and sustain the Arctic as a peaceful, prosper and democratic region of the world today. In the Faroe Islands, of course, we have approached this by adopting a new national security policy, unanimously adopted by our parliament. And that is, of course, not only focused on our security, but on the security and peace and prosperity of the Arctic as a whole. And on that note, we are, of course, very pleased that the EU has placed Arctic high on the agenda, and also Arctic security. Our main concern is, of course, aside from the atrocities in Ukraine and so on, that the tension in the world today shall not spread to the Arctic. So our main focus is that we will have to commit to all international rule-based regulations and cooperation in the Arctic. And this goes, of course, for security issues. In the Faroe Islands, we are committed to work together with NATO and the EU, of course, on traditional security, but also the broader security issues of cybersecurity, marine traffic security, search and rescue, climate change, and so on and so on. And our main focus is, of course, that now, when there also is increased investment in traditional military equipment, also in the Arctic, we must have a broader perspective on this. And I always look back to the late Thorvald Stoltenberg, Jens Stoltenberg's father. He made a report to the Nordic Council of Ministers and to the Nordic Council in 2013, before Crimea and so on. And his message was that security in the Arctic and the North Atlantic will have to focus on, then when we do and make investments in security, we have to focus on a more broad aspect. So all investments in military equipment should also be investment in monitoring climate change, environmental security, security for the people that live there, security for our resources and so on. So there must be a synergy between the traditional security aspect in military equipment and also equipment that can also secure our resources, our shipping, sailing routes, our environmental preparedness and so on and so on. And I think that is extremely important in the approach to security issues in the Arctic and the North Atlantic of today. Of course, from a Faroe perspective, we are focusing on cybersecurity, working closely together with all our Nordic partners and our Arctic partners, with the EU, with the US and so on. We are supporting NATO defense efforts in deterrence, of course, act as a host nation for the increased activity that also already is taking place in our region. We see the Faroe Islands as the center of the GI-UK gap, if there should be a God forbid it, a conflict. So again, democratic sustainability, where our nations are taking part directly in all issues regarding security, is the most important message from us also to the EU. And we think that the EU can play a crucial part in this cooperation. We are also pleased that earlier this year, Commission President von der Leyen and Prime Minister Johannesson on the Faroe Islands signed a strategic EU-Faroe Islands partnership, and that offers a platform for further cooperation on a broad range of issues, also on security in the broad sense that I have mentioned here. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, we think that security of the world is also based upon security and prosperity in the Arctic. We feel the tension, we feel the pressure from Russia, from China every day, and therefore we have to have a broad perspective on all security issues. And finally, we think that upholding international and regional management procedures, upholding regional and international law on the seas, on the resources, on the partnership of the people of the Arctic is the most important in securing the North Atlantic and the Arctic as a peaceful and prosperous part of the world. And I think this is crucial for securing peace in the world as a whole in the future. So we look forward to this discussion today, and we look forward to the increased cooperation between the EU, all the Arctic nations, and the whole world community in securing that the Arctic will be a sustainable region not only in peace and security, but also in democratic sustainability, where the people of the Arctic are not spectators, but are active stakeholders in all security issues of the Arctic and the world today. So thank you very much, and thank you for your effort with this symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that clear address. And we are happy to include all the different Arctic areas in this symposium. As we say, there is not one Arctic, there are many Arctics. And we need to include all parts of the Arctic. And I think the next keynote speaker is a good illustration of this. You have already met her for yesterday's ritual that started the symposium. Ayo Peters is a Chinook lawyer and also sealskin designer and much more. She's from Greenland and have lived in Canada and also getting the Order of Canada. It is now my privilege to give the floor to you and also some of your colleagues, as I understand it. So please, the floor is yours.
Our language and our culture derives from our environment. We live in the Arctic, and the language of our environment is, the song that I was singing is a traditional Inuit song. It talks about the nature. It talks about the cold, how you have to be aware of the cold and learn how to survive and thrive in the Arctic. In the cold. We have occupied the Arctic for thousands of years. Charlotte and Bent from Greenland have joined me on stage. They wish to be here because, as the previous speaker said, in the Faroe Islands was different because they lived in the Arctic. I had been asked if I wanted to go to the South Pole on several occasions. And I said, why would I go if I'm not allowed to eat the animals that are there? That's true. We eat our animals, and we cannot grow anything in the Arctic. When I was protesting the legislation of Holland in 2007, the young protester came to my son and asked, why do you need to hunt? Why can't you just grow potatoes? I said, well, because of the permafrost and because of the ice and snow, we cannot grow anything. And then he was smart enough to offer that we could move to Holland. And I said, our ice is melting, and Holland is under the level of the water. I think you're going to come knocking on our door very soon. So you're welcome to come to Canada. Because I looked up Berlin, how big it is. Actually, it's, my territory alone is 441 times bigger. The square kilometer population in Nunavut is 0.0, where here, per square kilometer, you have 550 people. So there's lots of space for everybody, for you to come. What I wanted to address was when I first came to Europe, after going to school in Denmark, I was protesting the legislation that was affecting our ability to sell sealskin and seal products in Europe. Now I have come back, and I'm pleased to come back to tell you that that legislation trying to exempt Inuit seal hunting and ability to sell seal was a total ban. It didn't work for us. We haven't sold anything because the images that people were fed, the anti-sealing campaign, totally destroyed our economy. And we come from a culture where we have to share our food. We don't have to, we do it. Our hunters go hunting, they don't sell the meat, they share it with the community. And we have the highest cost of living, we have the highest unemployment. And after forced centralization into communities, the slaughter of the sled dogs and the residential schooling, taking away children from their communities, now we couldn't even make a living on selling the seal that we depended the income on. And that is such injustice. The Europeans said that it was immoral to kill seals and that they should be allowed to live. Guess what? Since early 60s to now, in early 60s there was 1.5 million hub seals. Today you have around 10 million hub seals that are consuming about 10 million tons of fish every year. And our traditional Inuit saying is, when there's an overpopulation of a species, it's not healthy. And it's true now that we have an overpopulation of foxen, for instance, in Europe, where about, how many? 2 million are killed every year. But because Europeans are saying it's immoral to use the fur of an animal that you kill, they're just burned or disposed of. Our hunters and our communities over thousands of years have practiced that we only take what we need. And we use everything that we take. So from the seal skins that we get, we eat all the meat, we share the meat and the fat with the community, because if it's minus 60 outside, you need that nutrition. Seal is incredibly nutritious, and it warms you up right away. This is what we need, and this is what we have depended on for as long as we've been around. Now, what is immoral is that you kill all these animals in Europe, and you don't use them. You just dispose of the furs that are biodegradable. I spent 2 days here in Brussels looking for something that was natural, cotton or something not made out of plastic or gasoline. And it was very, very hard to find something. All the coats that people are wearing outside, they're all not biodegradable, they're all synthetic. And synthetic, by the way, is not cotton. So what I wish for you to take away from this is, don't just jump on the wagon of something. You have to do due diligence. Is it true that there's millions and millions of seals? And is it true that it is immoral to make use of the animals that you kill? For us, Inuit, and in Canada, it's against the law, actually, to kill something just to kill it. You have to make use of whatever you're killing or taking. And I think it's about time that Europe and the Parliament look again at that legislation that is supposedly exempting the Inuit, or because it's a total ban on our ability to sell and make a living. Our life is harsh enough. It's cold. We have very little money for the hunters to go hunting and feed the communities. I think we should get rid of that legislation that is so harmful to our Inuit people, both in Greenland, in Canada, in the Arctic. Just at the end, I would like to show you a trailer, because I'm hoping you'll come and watch the documentary that is being shown tomorrow called Twice Colonized. And we'll just be showing the trailer now. I timed the talk, so we have a few minutes. Tänne tusahtaukeali. Tamaningin namnartukut. Inuyugut suli. I live in Canadian Arctic, but I went to school in Denmark when I was a child, because I was colonized by them. That's my colonizer right there. You want to see my lawyer outfit? No other people in court has that. Only I have the sealskin because I fight for First Peoples' rights. We should be included in the discussions as nation states are. The memory, it's not bringing joy to me. We forgot our language, our culture, our connection. There was so much destruction. Vi skal komme.
Fordi du taler dansk?
Yeah. I haven't been able to leave the trauma and learned behavior behind. I find myself in situations that are not good for me, but that's what I know. Our children are going hungry. Our hunters are so humiliated. You're born to this world to make a difference. Look at this. The empire is here. What would you like us to do? Do you want us to be sustainable and traditional, or do you want us to be part of the modern economy? Guess what? It is our choice. A friend.
You become angry?
No, I'm just relearning my Danish.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this strong intervention. We live in uncertain times, and that is not least true for the Arctic, as we know. We need to bring in the experience from within, but we need also to understand the world around. That is what we now will dig into regarding how the new global landscape affects us. To take us through this, we have Gunhild Haagensen-Gjørv. Gunhild is a professor in security and geopolitics at the Arctic University of Norway, one of the universities in the Arctic Six Alliance between the Northern European universities in Sweden, Finland and Norway. Please introduce yourself, the session and your speakers. Please, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to moderate this next panel. Now, the panel that we're having is going to try to give a backdrop in an hour and 15 minutes about the security and geopolitical situation we find in the Arctic. Already, since yesterday, if you didn't know it before, the Arctic, you can't call it the Arctic because there's so many different places, so many different both people, situation, ethnicities, nationalities, positionalities. It's not just a broad area, but it encompasses, what is it that's roughly said, around 4 million people, half of which are probably not represented here because of the geopolitical split at the moment in the Arctic that we see between what we've been talking about, the Arctic 7, which are now NATO states, and Russia. So my background is in international relations and security, and normally the panel that you would see here, or not normally, in the old days, like when I was studying, you'd probably see military people here and what are called real security experts. Our point of our panel is to show we don't represent everybody, but this is our manageable number. We've already heard, and we should continue to hear from not least indigenous peoples and young people, youth groups and stuff. We have a small representation of who actually need to be talking about security today. So I would like to ask our panelists to come up. We have Lieutenant General Rolf Folland, the Norwegian military representative to NATO. Anita Parlow, former Fulbright scholar and a lawyer. Please come up when I call your name. Dag Rune Olsen, rector of the UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. Tukka Karjalainen, who is the Rovaniemi Municipality Senior Advisor. And not least, Jonas Andersen, Chair for Region Jämtland, Härjedalen. So if I could have everyone come up onto the stage. Do we have all five? One, yes. Please have a seat. Yeah. Oh, okay, I'll sit over there. I just want to make a couple of points before we get rolling. And what we have is we have just a small representation of people who are in positions of responsibility, who actually need to be thinking about security in a broader way and understand what is now impacting geopolitical trajectories, that it's not just about a line between West and East anymore. Actually, our values have something to say. Our identities have something to say. Our own individual securities have something to say. One of the things which we may talk about here, well, I'm going to make them talk about it, is that the threat picture is not just the sort of classical, which is not unimportant, but classical sort of military threat picture, but we see threat dynamics, threat activities taking place, what are called under threshold, that is, which is not necessarily traditionally military in nature, but which attempt to destabilize, reduce trust, increase doubt within our societies. It's actually targeting us. We often now know them as hybrid threats, and they're of a multiple nature, from sabotage to espionage, hacking, all types of sort of cyber attacks, disinformation not least. These things are attempting to destabilize societies from within. So we are going to be trying to give you this broad picture of what security and geopolitics looks like today in a very complex region. So I'm going to move over there and get us started. Okay, now that I've moved positions. So we're not completely a manel, thank God, but not far from it. Again, I want to emphasize we're not representing everybody. In fact, all of us should be on this panel and having this discussion. So we're actually the start for this kind of discussion. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our panelists to provide 5-minute interventions to say something about the complexity of security and geopolitics in the Arctic. And I'd like to start with Lieutenant General Rolf Follen, just to give some general insights regarding the security situation in the European Arctic in particular, but also broadly, and the priorities for NATO. You've got 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, you can go there if you want. Okay, thank you. I'm the traditional classical dinosaur here on the military side. I'll go right on. First of all, I spent most of my military years working in the Arctic, basically as a pilot, search and rescue, Coast Guard, Special Forces, stuff like that, in the Arctic region, up in the high north in Norway. The Arctic is a bridge. It is a lot of things, but it's also a bridge between Europe and North America and Indo-Pacific. And I believe that allies and partners that seek to uphold the values that we are seeking and the international rules-based order must work very closely together for their prosperity, for the people in the Arctic and the security in the Arctic. But I must say it's important that we look behind just defense and also work hard on areas like diplomacy, economics, and of course, science. And security is not only a defense mission. We all have a very important role to play, and we must come together to play on all those arenas. Of course, I'm a military guy, so I will focus more on the military security in the Arctic. And it is only possible when we have a collective security of the Arctic in a system of international norms. And collective security is normally built on trust. Russia holds the largest landmass in the Arctic. It is the biggest actor in the Arctic, also militarily. But Russia's unprovoked war in Ukraine has eroded trust. So I will speak a little bit on some of my observations on Russia in the Arctic. First of all, the Kola Peninsula, very close to Norway, up in the high north in the Arctic, houses Russia's critical second strike nuclear capabilities, and of course it also is the home for the Northern Fleet. And this makes it a focal point for both NATO and of course Norway when it comes to deterrence and defense priorities. Russia's reliance on nuclear capabilities has, as you probably have observed, grown due to the weakening of its conventional forces, especially on the land side, the land domain forces. And I believe that this, the nuclear triad position at Kola, and where it can portray, in all domains actually nuclear power with this triad. I believe this is the greatest threat towards NATO, and definitely the focal point for the nations in the north, among those Norway. The Black Sea Fleet is half broken. It's locked. The Baltic Sea is narrow, shallow, and basically surrounded by NATO countries, NATO nations, NATO allies. So the Northern Fleet is the only place where they actually have freedom to maneuver into the Arctic, into the Norwegian Gap, and into the North Atlantic. So the Barents Sea and the Arctic serve as a gateway for Russia to portray power out in the global arena. Another thing, climate change. And this is also very well connected to security. It's changing, the Arctic is changing, as we know. It's melting, creating new opportunities. But from my perspective, it's creating a lot of, the activity increase in a lot of areas, both when it comes to fisheries, tourism, and the search and exploitation of oil and gas, and also the hunt for rare earth minerals below the sea bottom. And this increase in maritime activity will also increase the need for search and rescue, Coast Guard, and more Arctic governance. And this is in an area where we see the great power rivalry. We see more influx of Chinese activity. We see more cooperation between Russia and China, also in the Arctic. They've been sailing together with battleships. We've seen they've been doing long-range aviation with bombers in the Arctic and the near Arctic area. And we also see more Coast Guard activity doing that together with the Russian and Chinese Coast Guards. So when I was air chief, I will just wrap it up now, but I was air chief of Norway in the period 2021 to 2024. And in this period I met General C.Q. Brown, who is now the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. He was then chief of the U.S. Air Force. And he said his kind of slogan was accelerate, change, or lose. And I think this is actually one of our biggest challenges, also when it comes to the Arctic. Our ability to adapt fast enough to the changes we see, both on the security policy side, but also environmental, science, economics, everything is changing. So this ability to adapt fast goes for a lot of arenas, and I think that is one of the main challenges. So I think for security in the Arctic, the most important thing right now, from my perspective as a Norwegian military officer and a representative to NATO, is actually that we are able to work together, all the actors that have stakes in the Arctic. And I think another thing is to be present, to actually build the right picture, because it's changing so fast. And I also think we should work hard on strengthening the governing bodies like the Arctic Council, which is a little bit divided right now. That is a challenge. I'll leave it with that, and then we can come back to questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And then we're going to move to, well, actually, I mean, let's just say we got a very good overall picture, but even though from a, Rolf, classic military guy, as you said, you have a much broader vision of security than what I remember hearing back in the old days when I started working on security studies. This is really important. I think, Anita, now, if you want to sit there, you can with a microphone, or it's up to you. You can also now expand on this particular picture and come from particularly under threshold, but also the relationships between institutions.
Thank you. I'd like to first thank the Arctic Futures Symposium and Joseph Cheeks, who carried me through, and Gunhild Hugensen-Grove, and the presenters from yesterday. And might I pick where you started? I will bring it up to that point. And forgive me, I'm reading my remarks to keep myself on point. So over the past decade, the world's rules-based order is being challenged in an increasingly open and targeted manner, creating challenges to liberal democracies, particularly in the West, as the distribution of power is on the table. When 2 fiber optic telecom cables were severed in the Baltic Sea a few weeks ago, a Chinese ship, the Yipeng 3, had sailed over the cables about the time that they were cut. Subsequently, the Danish Navy and German and Swedish Coast Guards opted to stand watch over the ship until they determined who caused what appears to be sabotage. A few months earlier, a recently consecrated Russian Orthodox church located in Sweden, close to the airport and electric power plants and other critical infrastructure, was linked to Russian intelligence operations. The church is also nearby to a nuclear power plant that provides fuel for a Ukrainian state enterprise that operates all 4 of its power plants in Sweden. As European and UK security and intelligence agencies increasingly and openly place the blame for sabotage, cyber disruptions, and vandalism on Russia, and less so, but increasingly China, as both nations seek to often jointly expand commercial activities in the region that is warming 4 times as fast as the rest of the world, Bundestag Chief Bruno Kahl indicated that the attacks went far beyond potential accidents or unconnected acts, saying he expects Moscow to further step up its hybrid attacks. The rising frequency of accidental cyber events, low-level destructive criminal acts, increasingly and regularly deployed by Russia, China, and Iran, illuminates the extent, intensity, growing sophistication, and acceleration of attacks against civilian populations and their infrastructure. In July, the Western NATO allies convened in Washington, D.C. during its 75th year anniversary. The 32-member Military Defense Alliance primarily discussed Ukraine and how they might improve support of the besieged nation to drive Russia out. The members also discussed the unfolding form of warfare deployed by attacks by its adversaries, attacks that bear scant resemblance to the threats following World War II. Hybrid war, a centuries-old political military strategy, has found contemporary foothold. The weapons of hybrid war, the internet, social media, artificial intelligence, culture, and law, are wielded to wage lawfare, create disinformation and misinformation systems, conduct small-scale vandalism to critical infrastructure, including the undersea and oil gas pipelines, and sabotage communication systems. Hybrid attacks often target societal principles such as democratic processes by creating alternative realities to sow social discord. The Estonian president suffered a hybrid attack when Estonia, following a hybrid attack from Russia in Estonia, pointed out that Russia's intention, along with China, increasingly the BRICS, intends to hollow out democracies and democratic institutions, create mistrust amongst the citizenry, and reshape the rules-based order that has existed since the end of World War II. Both Russia and China have expressed their distaste for an order that they say serves the interests of the West and the United States. Hybrid war has, and that may be true, but maybe there are other ways to challenge an orthodoxy. With the advent of smartphones, social media, and the interconnected digital networks, physical national borders have far less relevance. The concept of peace in the constantly moving cyber domain does not exist. So to successfully defend against hybrid attacks, the West is broadening its capabilities, collaborations, and fundamental meaning of war. As a corollary, given that the cyber domain knows no borders, the meaning of sovereignty itself is in question. Following its unprovoked kinetic invasion of Ukraine, the Kremlin unleashed its global hybrid assault as in 1923 breached several European banking institutions, including the European Investment Bank, in retaliation for Europe's support for Ukraine. In November that year, Denmark suffered its largest cyber attack on record when 22 power companies were shut down. In February 2024, Russian hackers injected malware into servers at the embassies of Poland, Georgia, and Ukraine to collect information on European and Iranian military activities. Svalbard archipelago, by virtue of its 1920 treaty, Russia is appropriately present. However, Svalbard appears to be a point of departure to the maritime Arctic and a centerpiece of Russia's high north, if not global strategy. On Svalbard, the Kremlin uses its legitimate 1920 treaty presence as its basis for lawfare, challenging Norway's environmental regulations as impeding its commercial activities in violation of the 1920 treaty, also challenging Norway's legitimacy to its continental shelf, calling the waters instead international, and seeking to impede West and NATO's access to the GI-UK gap, Greenland, Iceland, UK, Norway. The Kremlin's recently forged alliance with the newly expanded BRICS nations and its Svalbard-based science program appear a forward base for its hybrid operations or initiatives between Murmansk and the Atlantic. At the 2024 NATO summit, the heads of state agreed to establish a Belgium-based NATO integrated cyber defense center. The intention is to strengthen and secure allied networks, improve situational awareness, heighten cooperation and interoperability, end quote, and implement cyberspace as an operational domain. The Pentagon recently released its U.S. Pentagon its strategy to achieve IT integration and interoperability to turn strategic vision into operational reality, end quote. In this unfolding security landscape where the lines between physical and virtual realms blur, the traditional military strength cannot guarantee security. A combination of government, military, commercial, science, and local communities together are taking steps and need to improve capabilities from cyber defense to legal vigilance regarding the use of lawfare where legal challenges are deployed, often with ill intent. Following the NATO meeting, a Finnish ambassador privately noted that the allies must build a tight, as was said previously, integration of capabilities, both in the cyber domain, a new fundamental level of transparency, collaboration, and cooperation that overrides corporate or national security. Really, I think what he was saying is we need to rethink what sovereignty means. At this stage, there is no international law or really capability to determine what kinds of responses and when and how to take a determination of whether an act is part of hybrid warfare or just an act. What a vital question in all this, to go back to the NATO reference, is what does Article 5 mean? Is Article 5 applicable? Is a cyber attack an act of war in the conventional sense? Does Article 5, the language in Article 5, need be changed or altered in order to be able to appropriately respond to hybrid attacks? Given the context of hybrid war, the West must both strengthen and truly integrate its capabilities. It's not that Norway builds something, the States build something, and Iceland builds something, and then they share passwords because of the exact gaps. And it's the same in all of the processes that might be called security, whether in the classical sense or in the emerging sense of where security needs to be developed. And yesterday, if I may, a number of comments were made about Trump and the election of Donald Trump in the United States as President of the United States, and with a fair degree of concern. I certainly share your concern, but I do think that there are certain ways to reach him. For example, in the context of NATO, basically he was demanding everybody pay up, I think, as he said, so 2%, and pretty much more payments of 2% have in fact been made. And then there is a concern on top of that, or beside that, that he doesn't care too much for multilateral organizations. So there's NATO. So does that mean he's going to look to destroy NATO to the best he can? I don't think so. I think he wants to own it or control it, NATO, in a way that serves his, shall we say, personal interests. I think there's a way around these things, or to reach him with his, to reach him at the level where he lives. For example, if he was basically saying NATO has to increase, the NATO member states need to increase their contributions and increase their ownership, if you will, of the tactics and strategies of NATO, well, it would seem to me absolutely appropriate for the Arctic nations, NATO members all, with great understanding and capability of the Arctic region, and in the context of hybrid war, living right next door to Russia, to lead the way, and that the United States follow, and that Trump is told he would do a very good job by following the processes now that the members are paid up and are taking more responsibility for the defense of the region of the West. Who knows if it would work or not, but as somebody said yesterday, don't give up and act, and so we must. And I thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Anita. And I would like to say that there's a couple of points I want to bring from Anita's talk to what the direction that we're going in. That is both the types of coordination and cooperation between institutions and interstate institutions, but also how you were talking about the relevance of hybrid threats and the role of civilians and destabilization and distrust. and also not least the attacks being made against a very sort of Western-defined international order, which a lot of Western democracies are part of, and the failures of Western democracies, our weaknesses, the exacerbation of inequalities are actually targeted in this sense. This means not for democracies to just sort of crumble, but in fact we need places where we can engage these sorts of discussions about the inequalities and to try to improve democracies. This is where universities play a very important role, also being a center for reliable, trustful information and research production. So I'd like to hear from Dag Rune Olsen, who is the rector at UiT, to comment on these things.
Thank you. And thank you to my colleagues up here for comprehensive analysis of the situation we are currently in. We quite often say that, or describe rather, the Arctic as high north, low tension, which is obviously not this anymore the case, at least to the same extent as early on, obviously due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And obviously, again, as Russia makes out 40% of the Arctic, important Arctic state, which we cannot collaborate anymore with, as compared to early on. That has some severe consequences for academic institutions, for research. I will come back to that. But also we see there is an increasing interest in the Arctic from a variety of nations, not being Arctic nations themselves, but taking an interest in the high north in the Arctic for, I'm sure, a variety of reasons. Very often, research is at least a part of their toolbox in taking interest in the Arctic and having activities in the Arctic. So I think it's fair to say that obviously the situation is much more complicated. But for universities, that also represents I won't say an opportunity, but there's a demand for academic scholarly activities related to the new situation we are in the midst of. It's not like that it's of less importance to understand Russian politics and the geopolitics of the high north, of the Arctic, simply due to the fact that we do not collaborate with Russian institutions, and there is no trade, there's very limited diplomatic relations and things like that. On the contrary, it's more important than ever to have a grasp on the political situation, the economical situation, etc., in Russia. But also how the various actors in the Arctic play, the geopolitics of the Arctic. It really demands a scholarly approach to the or analytic approach to what's happening in the Arctic. So that is definitely a role also for academic institutions. How can we do that? Well, I think we need to collaborate because across institutional borders, across nations, obviously, in order to have let's say, a comprehensive view on what is actually happening, what is actually taking place. If you, for example, look at the climate change, which a number of people have alluded to that, obviously, it poses a huge challenge, a threat to livelihoods, etc., up north. I'm not going into detail because it has been dealt with early on, but since, again, Russia represents 40% of the Arctic, the landmass is enormous, the waters and seas, but we cannot have any data on what's happening in the Russian part of Arctic due to the lack of scientific collaboration. And this is pretty uncommon because, I mean, there has been crisis on this globe before, and the diplomatic relationships has been quite bad, not necessarily well functioning or not at all perhaps, but we always had some kind of science diplomacy where in the meaning of scientific scholars being able to collaborate across borders, even though it has been chill winds and the diplomatic relations have been quite bad. This is not the case anymore when it comes to Western or international collaborations with Russian scientists. So there is a lot of knowledge that we won't get hold of, which is probably crucial in the understanding of the ongoing climate change and the consequences of that. And that has security consequences as well, and also for military operations in the high north when the tundra is thawing and, landslides and things like that. So there's a lot of issues related to the consequences of the climate change. I think we also really need to understand to a much larger extent, Gunhild has pointed to the so-called hybrid threats. I think one of the complexities that we see that we need to dig into also from a scholarly perspective is how are these threats changing as compared to early on. Not only the classical military threats, but hybrid operations that is used to destabilize societies. Of course, they won't call for the same kind of military action as ordinary attacks or classical attacks by military or armed forces, but they might destabilize the society. And how do we deal with that? I think universities, of course, again, need to invest in understanding what's going on, but I think also universities plays a different role, because a democratic society rests on the discussions, the debates, the insight, and the openness that is also characterizing universities in the way they educate people, the way we do research. So in societies where we can suffer hybrid operations, or we can see or been subjected to hybrid operations in order to destabilize societies. I think it's extremely important that universities take on their role as institutions that can uphold a civilized debate, being sort of or deal with alternative truth and all these kind of things that we see challenge our society of today. I think to round off, to finalize my intervention here, I'd like to just point out that collaborating across Arctic institutions like universities, behind me you can see Arctic 5, I think it still says, it's now Arctic 6 universities, northern part of Norway, Sweden and Finland, but we also have universities of the Arctic, an institution that covers approximately 250 universities and research institutions that take an interest in the Arctic and are located in the Arctic. I think in order to be driving forces in understanding these challenges that we are that we face, but also in order to be contributors to sustainable societal development in the high north, in the Arctic. I think the educational and research scholarly activities across countries, across institutions in the high north, in the Arctic, is absolutely vital. And that is also creating resilient societies, which I think is more important than ever when we feel, when we are exposed to these kind of threats and a more or less stable Arctic. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And to take from what Dag Rune was just talking about, we're now moving into what it takes to build resilient societies, because actually what we're gravitating towards is, rather than military responses, a total defense or comprehensive security that is a civil military response. And that means that actors both in the military sphere but also in the civilian domain need to be thinking about how to mitigate or prevent particularly the under-threshold types of threats that are targeting the civilian domain. So now we're going to go to Tukka Karjalainen to get a municipality. Sorry for just, you know, for getting a municipality perspective. And you're in an interesting location, not just at the municipality at Rovaniemi, but there's talk about a forward land forces command there in the nearby area. Maybe you want to talk about, or at the, I can't say this either, the Sodankylä. Anyway, you might want to talk about that. But from a municipal standpoint, how should we be looking at the geopolitical situation we're confronting today? This is all yours in 5 minutes.
Thank you. This is particularly local point of view, but before that, just a couple of words to introduce shortly the Finnish comprehensive security concept, which under all municipalities also do they preparedness work. Roots of the Finnish cooperation model goes back to the 1920s. Of course, the system has evolved and changed during the decades, and name have changed plenty of times, but nowadays there is a security committee under Finnish government, which is also responsible to produce security strategy for society. And there is 7 vital society functions, and one of those are functional capability and for the population and services, and that obligates municipalities to do the preparedness work and planning for the normal times, and of course the emergency situation also. And municipalities provide most of citizens' basic services, such as primary education and waste management and that kind of things. Even if the provision of the services has been outsourced, the municipalities has the primary providing responsibility is the municipalities. After Russian invasion to Ukraine, Finnish government ordered each ministry to update emergency plans in their representative administrative branches. And so we have done also in Rovaniemi. We have, for example, updated our plans concerning command post and connections, civil protections plan, our evacuation plan, and plan for large-scale immigrations. We have upgraded and acquired more backup power generations and update our crisis communication plan and created website for preparedness issues for residents, and also have a couple of exercises to train these plans. This is just a short list, not all of, but to get the picture. And when it comes to forward land forces, as we know, after the 2017 NATO established battalion-size multinational troops in Baltic states and Poland, and after invasion, Allied reinforced those existing battalions and battle groups and agreed to establish 4 more multinational battle groups in Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania and Slovakia. And now as a new member, there has been a discussion that such a unit would be also set in Finland also. And according to Finnish media, the possible places might be city of Rovaniemi and village of Sodankylä, about 130 kilometers north of Rovaniemi. Well, Rovaniemi point of view, there has been multinational military exercise about 25 years in Rovaniemi, so the effect wouldn't be probably not be uncontrolled or dramatic. And as Mayor already yesterday mentioned, we have nowadays about 7,100 tourists per year, and it's rising, so FLF unit will probably blend it quite well. However, I must emphasize that no decisions have been made so far, at least not published, but we are definitely ready in Rovaniemi and warmly welcome those groups if so decided.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you for the focus on preparedness. As recently in Norway, we got a revamped update on our recommendations to individual households on preparedness. It's our Directorate for Preparedness, Civil Protection and Preparedness. I don't know what it is in English, actually. But I know Sweden also, their Ministry for Preparedness is also operating in these ways. And then Jonas Andersson, if you can let us know something from the regional perspective. And Sweden is in a very interesting position. We always talk about the borders against Russia, and Sweden is sort of squished in between Finland and Norway. And so what are the perspectives coming from your region?
Thank you very much. Is this thing on? Right, now. I would like to start to make a short, let's say, an analysis of the situation. The Nordic countries, for the first time since the 1500s, now have a common defense policy. Not since the Kalmar Union, which ended in the 1500s. We are now connected in a way we haven't been before. But that's on the national level. The defense area is a national area. When it comes to the civil defense and the preparedness area, it's more of a regional and local area of both expertise and responsibility. I would like to connect to both to the foreign minister, who said that the difference with Färöarna and other islands is that people live there, and that is also the difference with the big parts of the Arctic and other areas where there might be conflicts. People live there, and the people who live there is our main line of defense. If we want to have a sustainable and a long-time defense, we need to have people who can live there, who have the resources and the capability, and therefore development and sustainability and resilience is dependent on the possibility for the local authorities and for the regional authorities to make sure to provide the services that people and businesses need to stay and be active in this area. And therefore defense on the military scale and development and acceleration, as the Lieutenant General said, is necessary for a long-term sustainability. In Sweden, we have a principle called, now we're into translating again, but the responsibility principle, which means that any authority's responsibilities during peacetime is also that authority's responsibility during crisis or, worst case, war. And this puts kind of a lot of effort on a lot of people, because if everyone has heard about the Nordic countries, or at least Sweden's diminishing defense since the fall of the Berlin Wall, that's nothing compared to when you come to the civil defense. We have sold all of our fuel deposits that we have had for being ready for the worst case. We have quite frankly, been leaning very much on just-in-time procedures when it comes to food, when it comes to medicine, when it comes to the different things that the businesses and the farmers need to grow their food. So we're basically in a totally new situation, which shouldn't be new, because I mean, these 30 years we've seen the crises around the world, but it's new for us, and we have dismantled almost everything when it comes to that. So on the regional level and on the local level, Sweden is right now ramping up, trying to make sure that if we falter with our infrastructure in peacetime, how will it work during war? How will it be possible to get both troops, military resources, and what the civilian population needs? How do we create a situation where the health services can both take care of the civilian needs, which will be the same or higher during a crisis or a war, and at the same time also fulfill the baseline requirements of NATO? So I mean, for us, we're in a situation where we really need, on both the local, the regional, and the national level, to be kind of frank with what we have done in Sweden and make sure that we build up again. When it comes to, you mentioned the brochure that has been coming out now to every household in Sweden. And I mean, that is a way to prepare people to make sure that, of course, you should be able to rely on your local authority. You should be able to rely, but you also need to make sure that you're resilient in your own household. You need to make sure that you have fresh water for at least 72 hours, hopefully longer. You need to make sure that there's food enough for a couple of weeks, because as the Swedish Food Authority said a couple of weeks ago, and we all in the northern parts of Sweden became kind of angry over that, but they said that if there's a situation of war, we might need to dispopulate the north, because we haven't got the logistical chains to make sure that the food will reach the stores. And one might say that, yeah, that's one solution. The other one is to invest in infrastructure and make sure that those chains actually work, but still. So this brochure is a part of something new. I mean, I was born a bit before the fall of the Berlin Wall, but I have never, this hasn't been a topic in civilian households, and now it's a topic. It's a topic around the tables at your workplace, where you discuss preparedness, where you discuss your own responsibility in this. And lastly, I would like to say about concerning hybrid threats, that I think it's 5 years ago now, Sweden initiated a new authority called the Psychological Defense Authority, who also sends out material to people. How do you prepare yourself for disinformation, for alternative truths coming to you from different parts? And I think that's one of the most important, but also perhaps hardest areas for local, regional, and national areas to cope with, to make sure that we can withstand hybrid threats, both psychological ones, but also, of course, sharp ones when it comes to attacks on our digital infrastructure and so forth. So I think I'll stop there.
Great. Sorry, I'm trying to take yours, yeah. Combatant on the microphones. Thank you very much, because rounding off, Jonas is showing us about the types of challenges that we're facing, in particularly in the Nordic context. And we have to remember the Nordic context, of course, is going to be vastly different from the North American context when it comes to defense. But we're seeing, I think, more of a picture of the civil-military interaction that must take place for a proper sort of total defense or a comprehensive security. And one thing that is coming up here, I would say, is this notion of infrastructure that Jonas is talking about. The representative for the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs yesterday was talking about, in Norway we have like roughly 9% of the Norwegian population live in what is referred to as the North. North Norway comprises 35% of Norwegian territory. In that, there's 9% of the population. It's going down, by the way. But we have much more population in our north than in Finland and Sweden. The thing is that if this one crisis scenario, conflict scenario, is the closing of the Baltic Lake, In the event that that happens, because now that this is called the Baltic Lake, the NATO lake, the Baltic Sea is by Russia often referred to as the NATO lake, has a tight little closure there between Denmark and Norway. If this had been closed off and that there isn't possibilities to get supplies to Finland and Sweden in particular, you have 15 million people who are closed in, who need supplies to come up along the Norwegian coast. Does Norway up in the north have enough infrastructure in that region to be able to supply people? And this would be supplies both for civilian and military needs. So what I'd like to get into is actually, what do we need in the Arctic? And I might add, if it means greater infrastructure, this impacts different communities in different ways. And there are the indigenous peoples, particularly the Sami people in the Nordic North, that want to protect traditional lands, in particular for reindeer herding. So increasing infrastructure is not an uncomplex issue. So trying to take into the interests, the values, and the perceptions of security of different communities, while at the same time maximizing civil-military cohesion, how can we work towards a better coordinated, at least European North? And if there's any comments on what this means also for the North American. And I will start with Rolf, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's, to bring it back on the military side a little bit to start with, it's NATO's maybe most important task is actually to secure the sea lines of communication between North America and Europe. And those sea line of communications, that implies you have to secure the GIUK Norwegian Gap and also the APODs and the SPODs. The maritime and the airfields, the maritime harbors and airfields, to actually receive those logistical elements and then push them further into Sweden and Finland. And most of the lines of communication, the land lines of communication in the Nordic arena, they go from south to north direction. And now you need to revitalize and build up the infrastructure that goes from west to east, so you can actually push logistics from the harbors and the airfields in Norway further into Sweden and Finland. And that is worked on as we speak. I think it's at least a trilateral agreement between the different governments. But also the other way, and then we talk about military, how to bring wounded personnel back from the front line, if it's in Finland or Sweden, to hospitals in Norway, and then further on to other medical infrastructures. So that is a civilian military task right now, how to secure those lines of communication, both when it comes all the way from North America, but also on the Nordic soil.
Yeah, thanks. And we'll first go to Dag Rune, because he has a comment on this. But I think the question of infrastructure is really an important one. But Dag Rune, please.
I think the discussion we've had back home when it comes to infrastructure in northern part of Norway, well, when you look at the needed investments and return of those investments, one has figured out that, well, it's not worthwhile investing. I think the reason is, the reason for this kind of conclusion is that, of course, you haven't figured into the equation the security issues, the change that we are in the midst of. If you do the calculations, if you do the maths, again, with respect to, or taking into account also the need for investments and the return on the investment for increased security, that figure might look differently. But I totally agree with the Lieutenant General here that in Norway and in Sweden and Finland we always discussed north-south. And that does not do the trick with respect to the situation we are in now. We need to see east-west, but I think also in order to make these investments more sustainable, to contribute to resilient societies, I think we also need to focus on how to develop businesses that communicate, trade, talk, collaborate east-west in the northern part of the Nordics. Otherwise, we won't achieve our goals in building up this resilience, whether it's military, whether it's civilian societies, etc.
Thanks. And I think maybe we'll go straight to Jonas to comment on the similar situation about infrastructure, but also the challenges around it and what happens if supply lines get cut north-south, or we have to make use of the Norwegian coast. What do you see as being part of the challenges and how to fix it, essentially?
I would say that the main word, or the main words, because there are two of them, of this equation is dual use. We need to build the infrastructure for, of course, military needs, but it needs to be, as my colleague here on my right said, it needs to be also applicable for businesses, for people during peacetime, because otherwise you will never get a return on investment, even though I do not like that word when it comes to infrastructure. Sometimes I feel a little bit craven or cynical as a regional politician during these days, because suddenly my county in the middle of Sweden is on the top of the discussion points. We have never been that. We have been an end point earlier, but suddenly the transportation links between the ice-free harbors in Trondheim towards Sweden for both military and civilian interests is important in a new way. And we know that, I mean, basically, and now I might sound a bit colonial, but the railroad on the Norwegian side, the Meråkerbanan has looked the same since we built it during the Union years. It hasn't been done anything because the perspective has been north-south, and that has been a railway that never has been prioritized. And it's the same with Malmbanan, Ofotenbanan, and those are the two main lines for supplying both military needs, but also, as you say, civilian needs. We will need, probably, when the Baltic Sea, if the Baltic Sea gets closed, Finland takes up, I think, 80 to 85% of all their imports through the Baltic Sea. All of those imports will need to be moved. Will need to be moved to come to the Norwegian harbors and then ferried over in some way, probably on railway, towards Finland. And this puts a new strain and a new perspective. And I think the reasoning that we need to get the preparedness, the resilience into the equation when our transport authorities does their equations of if something is investable or return on will yield a return on investment, because otherwise we will never see the investments that we need for both civilian and military reasons.
Thanks. And perhaps from a municipal perspective.
Thank you. What it comes about security of supply, we have to remember that also St. Petersburg are very depending on Baltic Sea, and those security of supplies comes also with by the sea. We have done road trip at the region, at the border, Narvik, Kiruna, and we have already common understanding and common interest to update infrastructure in that area. There is coming common statement, and what we need in that area nowadays is a state-level agreement and, of course, some money.
Yeah. Isn't that what it always comes down to? We need some money. Anita, I'm thinking you're getting more of a very Nordic perspective, but you can maybe take us out again and give us sort of a broader view before we go to questions to the audience.
Not so much a broader view, but...
microphone.
Oh, thank you. Senator Murkowski from Alaska has recently been addressing this issue, and she has run down every point of attack, really, I guess one would say, that is occurring in Alaska. And one of the points that she made is that just what's being said here is resilience and backup. So you can't just have one communications capability in a remote area that gets taken out because then you don't have communications. So she was speaking quite a bit about resilience in that respect. And then also the information sharing. There's been, sort of planes in international airspace and boats and vessels and with China and Russia on the Bering Sea and international waters, and really kind of a ramping up of a variety of dimensions in which the threats are operable. And communications, she says, is really important broadly, both within state and then within nation and then amongst nations, just as being talked here. And then the points being made here, she also made in terms of local, national, international, in a very coherent manner must be the capacity for communication and knowledge shared at the most delicate levels, shall we say, because this is, I think, maybe where it operates. And if I may make just a quick point, I've learned a lot, thank you. But in the context of waiting for Russia to stop its genocide in Ukraine in order for us to move forward doesn't seem like the best idea. And I'm speaking out of my space here, but if we can figure out as a species of how to get the most minute information from Mars, probably we can figure out ways to get information in the Northern Sea route. And given climate, which works for and against us, I guess, in various kinds of ways. The ice will melt outside of territorial waters, and at a certain point there'll be access where there isn't now. And what does that mean? The person who spoke yesterday, I forgot her name, forgive me, for the Inuit Circumpolar Conference, made a very interesting.
Sarah Olsvik.
Yes, Sarah Olson. She said that, look, we're cross-border. I mean, we're here and there and here, and we're communicating. And to the extent that we do so and we stay out of the way of reprisal, that we're able to engage in manners that otherwise don't occur. And perhaps the ICC might have some concepts that could be brought, not perhaps, they have concepts that could be brought into, and really, in a sense, taking a leading edge on, how the cross-border communication information that wants to be maintained privately amongst allies. So it seems the sort of local, national, international component of it is absolutely critical, and that we have the capacity, as people had said yesterday, to move forward without them. We don't need to wait and welcome them back, at some point. But right now, we are fully capable of acting, in ways that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Thanks. And a last comment from Rolf before we take a couple of questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick comment, because you said some parts of Arctic people live there, but there are also huge areas where there are no people. And from a military side, one of the challenges is actually to have sensors so that we actually can build a picture and know what's going on. Because what are we afraid of? We're afraid of someone interfering with the sovereign rights and do some land grab or exploit resources where they cannot do it and stuff like that. Well, we have to know that it's going on, and it's huge areas that we don't know anything of. So, and this goes to accelerate, change or lose. The space domain is here. That's the infrastructure we really have to build on. Because, for example, long-range UAVs, it's almost impossible to operate those in the harsh environmental and meteorological conditions up there. So the space domain is the new front, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And really good points, because space, both on the ground, the areas where there are not a lot of people. However, as in Canada, there are attempts, if I understand, with the use of the Rangers, learning from people who have a sense of these great spaces is also very much part of this knowledge base we need to know. And then, of course, there's outer space that we need to keep in mind. Are there a couple of questions? Yes, I see, two excited hands in the back. I will go first to, with the glasses and the dark. Yeah, you, I'm pointing, yes, you. Yes, you've stood up, perfect. You can ask. And then the Rasmus after him, and then I will look for others. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Demin George, I'm a Reykjavik-based consultant. I heard a lot this year about China. And what's striking is that we were already, it was already obvious 10, 15 years ago that China's interest in the Arctic was not only about the nice landscapes, but that it was hidden under the carpet, at least publicly. And the China-US competition in the Arctic was very tense during Trump's first term. So my question is, how do you foresee this competition in the Arctic to evolve during Trump's second term?
Okay, hold your thoughts because we'll go to Rasmus. We'll just get a couple of more questions.
Yes, I'm Rasmus Bertelsen, a colleague of Gunhild at UIT. A quick question is probably particular to General Folland. You're all talking about, a quite high level of escalation, crisis, war. So my question is, what's the professional official thinking about the escalation ladder going there? I mean, we don't randomly wake up one morning with a crisis or war in the Arctic. So what is the thinking about the escalation ladder going there? Thank you.
Great, thanks. Do we have one more or should we? Yeah, and then the last question we'll take is there. And then we'll just, all of you will get a chance to respond.
Thank you. My name is Sebastian. I'm from the Norwegian Institute of Water Research, NIVA. One other thing that we don't wake up randomly one morning is without population in the north. Gunhild mentioned before that there is less and less people in the north. Currently in Norway, I believe you mentioned 9 million. There's also in northern
9%, not 9 million.
Yes, 9%. That's correct. 9 million would be quite a lot more.
Actually, it's 8.8 now.
So my question is, how do we deal with this? Who should deal with this? And what are the solutions?
Thank you very much. And starting with answers to this, I'm going to start with Dag Rune, if you have any.
Well, when it comes to the rivalry between US and China, I think we have to be aware of the fact that when incoming President Trump states something, we need to wait for the action to see what it actually ends up being. He has already said that, and let's say, challenged China with respect to trade. We saw quite recently that he proposed tax increase on goods from China with 10%, but from Mexico and Canada it was raised with 25%. So I think we have to see what kind of actions that are actually being made when he is in the Oval Office before we actually do know what will be the rivalry between China and US when it comes to the Arctic. And there are, of course, a number of other arenas where these two big nations will also have their controversies. When it comes to the northern part of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and other places there, we would like to see to it that we at least maintain, perhaps also even increase the population. I think it's a highly complex question. I think if you look at different countries, they've tried out different policies and they haven't worked out very differently. I think one of the critical issues is at least that we need to be able to develop businesses that attract people that can also live in these societies with a life quality and a work-life balance and all these things that is appealing to young people. Of course, with the let's say new or the increased enhanced possibility of working remotely, you can virtually be employed at any sort of company, at least if you work through your computer mostly. So there are new possibilities, but I'm absolutely sure that we need to develop businesses in those regions we would like to populate. It's not simply enough with whether it's military personnel or it's public institutions. We need to have the complete societal mix of these, and then of course it's policies that has been to be installed, and there has to be willingness in investing in rural areas to set up companies, businesses, and then again I think that rests on the willingness to install policies for that.
Thank you very much. Tukku, do you have comments from just really the civilian side, the city level side? We're talking a lot about cooperation. Dag Rune has talked about business. We're talking about critical infrastructure. From your position, what would be, and also about the questions that we have often about infrastructure, China is trying to woo a lot of our municipalities with investments and such. So what is the position from your side?
Thank you. In city point of view, municipality level, of course those infrastructures which are under discussions will make a living environment much better and much easier if they exist someday. And that might be one of the answers, the population's level, and maybe so many won't like to move south anymore. What it comes to escalation at the Arctic level, in my point of view, it's depending on the point of view, it can be also seen as a stabilization. Meanwhile, when we were discussing about low tension and Arctic, the Russians was rebuilding bases and garrisons over there, and as a general already mentioned, they are only superpower and at the Arctic at the moment. So if so-called West is doing there something, we are just going to the stabilizing level, not escalating.
Thanks. And Jonas, if you want to take the task of answering those three broad questions.
Well, I mean, if I'm gonna start at the local level or at the regional level, we saw about a decade ago how China started to buy critical infrastructure from the municipalities to provide services for the municipalities, and I think that's one of the main reasons why we need to have a place-based policy and a national and European strategy for investment and for development, which does not make these offers attractive for the municipalities. We heard stories about harbors being bought by Chinese entities in the last stage, or at the highest level they were state-owned. I mean, that gives them a certain level of information about critical infrastructure, of a possibility to hinder or, in worst case, even destroy communications in our country. So I think China should be top of mind, even though right now we're talking a lot, of course, of Russia and the eastern threat closest to our borders. But there is still a large Chinese interest in Northern Europe, and we need to be careful about that. Regarding escalation, I mean, no one here thinks that we will see a full-scale invasion tomorrow. We will see this in incremental steps, and I think that most of those threats are, of course, handled by our military friends, but at the local and then regional level, we need to make sure that we have the sustainable society for people to be able and to want to live. We have seen in most of the northern parts of the Nordic countries more and more fly in and fly out regarding businesses, people who do not really raise families and live in the area. And I think that we need to get a change of perspective on that, and we need to make sure that our national governments and also the European level understands that to be long-term feasible to have a presence and a good presence in this area, there need to be sustainability, there need to be development, we need to have the financial infrastructure when it comes to investments, for companies and businesses. So that would be the main solution to that, I think. Lastly, one more thing, I'm sorry, I would like to say is that we need to move from just in time to just in case, because that's the main threshold we need to get over now. We haven't got today the resources or the capabilities for a long-term closing of the borders, and we need to be able to both uphold local, regional and business practices, even though the logistical chains might close for a while or even longer terms.
And yes, I am eating into your snack time, but I do want to hear from our last two panelists, Rolf and Anita, on these questions, just briefly.
Yeah, I'll answer one of them. I think you was asked about the escalation ladder. It is a lot of talking about the worst case scenario, and that's how we plan militarily. But it's about deterrence and defense. So we have to prepare for war to actually deter from war. So that's the case. Nobody wants war. We want to maintain peace, but to be able to do that, we have to actually deter credibly, and that's why we have to be present and build capabilities and integrated air missile defense to defend from the missile threat. Russia is a big missile actor, and be able to build for flexible response launch options when it comes to bringing new satellites into space, stuff like that. That is credible deterrence, and that's why we prepare for that, because we don't want war.
Thanks, and Anita, you get the last brief word.
I'll be brief, thank you. I would basically be saying the same thing, just to say that the U.S. 4 years ago in its election, 22 states were impacted by information and disinformation campaigns. And the points being made about the investment at local development, the local, state, national, regional, absolutely key. The U.S. is for sure way behind on that. And the capabilities absolutely essential. And the escalation question is they keep pushing, and everywhere they push, they see what the reaction or the response is. Not to sound too paranoid about it, but when you have flights overhead and boats and vessels with China and Russia going up the Bering Sea in coordination with the kinds of cyber attacks and the kinds of cutting of cables below the sea, and not all has been proved at this point, and important again to be sure of the facts. But it all starts to look like a picture, and it's an attack on democracy, as the Estonian president said, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks all for handling a really complex subject in a short period of time. My thank yous.
For a very relevant session, and I think the morning has already made the need for debrief discussions in small groups, and in Swedish we call that fika. So now some coffee to lubricate the machineries, and we are a bit behind schedule, but we try to catch up, so please try to be back at 11 o'clock, and remember not to bring any beverages or any food into this room. So please be back in a quarter of an hour, a bit more. Thanks. Okay. Hello. Let's see if we can get the people in here. It's not easy to get everyone here. If someone sees the bell, we are searching for the bell to ring. It's much easier to make people to understand it's time to get back. Ah, perfect. Yes. Josef, as always, will save us. Okay, find your places. We will restart. It's always a bit of an issue to get back from good discussions, but you will be able to continue the discussions afterwards. And now it's time to start the second session this morning. We need to understand what happens around us, as the discussions so far have shown, but we need also to be able to take our own destiny in our own hands. In the bottom line, it's about being smarter and building on existing knowledge and the unique environment in the Arctic for the future. So the next panel will discuss innovation, entrepreneurship and collaboration. And I give the word to the next moderator from also the Arctic University of Tromsø, Norway, Linda Solstrand Dahlberg, that is Senior Advisor and Brussels representative for the university. So please take the stage and introduce yourself and your discussions and your panelists. So please.
Thanks very much. All right, so my name is Linda Solstrand Dahlberg. Like was just said, I am the Senior Advisor and Brussels representative for the University of Tromsø, the University of Arctic here in Brussels. This is day 2, and I am stepping in for Jan Gunnar Winther, who is a pro-rector at the University of Tromsø, who unfortunately couldn't travel here today. So please bear with me. But we have an exciting panel today. I think the last panel actually provided a really good segue into this discussion, because we will explore entrepreneurship, innovation, and regional collaboration when it comes to developing the Arctic and facing the Arctic challenges in a sustainable way. So I think, you know, we've mentioned a few of the topics here. We have population decline, we have an energy shortage in the future. In fact, the Norwegian Water Resources and Energy Directorate have forecasted a lack of energy in 2040 of 16 terawatt hours. So we are facing some big challenges if we're not doing anything about the energy mix of the future. Forecasting also shows that we are facing a growing population decline in the Arctic, and I think it's important to note that we will focus mostly here on the Nordic and European Arctic and the challenges we are facing there when it comes to business and innovation. But I think some of these are quite general issues that we can also learn from in other places in the Arctic as well. So let's get the panelists on stage. Let us sorry, you will see the name up on the screen, but let's welcome to the stage Anja Elise Fagereng, who's the project manager from Bodø International School, from the Bodø Regions Utviklingsselskap, BRUS, the developing of Bodø region. We also have Sabrina Suicki, who works with international affairs and regional export cooperation in the Norrbotten Chamber of Commerce. We have Helga Kristin Fritjonsdottir. I'm sorry, Helga, if I said thank you, aka Helga Stina, I think that's easier, who's the founder and CEO of the Iceland Unwrapped company. And then we have Tanya Frasau Nunes, who is the legal and policy advisor of small and medium enterprises in DG Grow. And then we have Ernst Olsen, who's an advisor for the North Atlantic Cooperation, NORA. Welcome everybody to the stage. So, we will, like I said, explore some of the key elements needed to build a culture of sustainable entrepreneurship in the Arctic. And I think we should start high level. Perhaps, well, we will start with an introduction from each and every one of you, and you have up to 3 minutes to deliver your key messages. But we will then go into the high-level stuff before we dip into the details. But how about we start, again, high-level with Aina, and then Sabrina.
Hello, this is on. Thank you for inviting me for this panel. I work in BRUS. We are developing the Bodø region and also a lot of the parts of northern Norway. We are the only wholly private-owned company that works with development, so we kind of don't have to rely on the public law that a development company that's owned by the government have to oblige to. I work with certain issues. My specialty is in strategic communication, networking, and engaging, and where our main mission is being the host office. We are the glue between investors, businesses, and other interests and stakeholders. We talk a lot with politicians, with the media. We kind of glue everything together, but we're not normally the experts on certain fields. But we hear what the experts have as an issue and try to help them in what's already established to see how we can further open opportunities. But for the investors coming too, we help them with the status report. What is our region? How are the communities responding to certain things? If you come and want to build windmills in a region, you're going to see that that's quite hard. You need to do the research before coming, and we will help do the research so we can actually build something that is sustainable for the future, but also sustainable for the people living in a region. We do own a lot of projects ourselves because our owners have told us that we have to start these projects, but we also, in most part, are taking part of someone else's project. We help. We're not rented in because we can't get rented for a job because usually we just help investors get in hold with established businesses from beforehand or to get in touch with the municipalities mostly. Lately, we also have worked more with strengthening our relationship with Sweden and Finland because we have the east-west corridor that we have to look at of the opportunities, especially in the military part. But as I said, military, we have to have dual use of all the things that we're going to develop. What we would develop for military is also good for all the businesses and people, for instance, in transportation. But in this panel, I will come into 2 specific projects that I can use as examples. As the project manager for the establishment of Bodø International School, I'm going to use that. We're going to come back to it. Some of the hindrances and opportunities and why we do that. And also we have started one company that's under us, and it's called Blue, where we work with green Arctic aviation development. And that's also something that our owners said that we had to do because we didn't have any investors or partners at the time, so we had to start it from ground and build it up like a startup. So we also do that. So also there's some ups and downs and some good news and some still, what can I say, hills that we need to face. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sabrina Svicke. I work as an international business manager at the Norrbotten Chamber of Commerce. That is the northernmost region in Sweden that consists of 25% of the total area in Sweden, but only 2.5% of the people. So we have 250,000 people living in Norrbotten that I represent. And today I'm here also talking from the point of view that we have this foreign trade promotion assignment at our chamber that is part of the national strategy for foreign trade, but also part of the regional development strategy that we have in Norrbotten. We consist of 330 member companies in our chamber that have an annual turnover of 132 billion kroners. They employ around 30,000 people in Norrbotten, and I would say also that most of you perhaps have heard about the green transition that is happening up north in Sweden, but also within the Arctic Europe or the northern parts of Sweden, Finland and Norway. So I can also mention here in the beginning that the investment volume today for market-driven projects is 1,450 billion kroners, and 1,050 of those are in Norrbotten. So we have a lot of projects ongoing. Our home market is internationalization all the time, and our companies are also relying a lot on export. 65% of the Sweden's export of mineral and mining products come from Norrbotten, and 90% of the iron ore in EU is extracted in Norrbotten. So the infrastructure is really key for us up north, especially in the east-western side, from Luleå to Narvik on the Malmbanan that Jonas also mentioned earlier. So looking forward to discuss more today.
Within Sweden, because we really see a population increase there and more investment, so we'll come back to that. But let's stick to the high level and go to Ernst and the regional cooperation.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Ernst, representing Nordic Atlantic Cooperation, NORA. We are basically a project funding program under the Nordic Council of Ministers. So we are operating along the basic values that they are presenting. I think I'd like to point to the map over there. There is a challenge. We are a program consisting of cooperation between Greenland, Iceland, Faroe Islands, and coastal Norway. So not the capital region, but coastal. These are immense areas, and I was just thinking about the presentation before that you have an issue with transport going from Norway across to Finland. But if you can imagine cooperation between partners from southern Greenland up to Kirkenes, Norway, well, this is actually what we do. We have plenty of projects actually that are going this far. So you might imagine that we need a very elaborate and streamlined system to govern this project funding program, but I don't think it's fair to say that's the case. It started informally in around '85 by cooperation between some partners in Faroe Islands and Iceland. It grew to include all of Iceland. Greenland came along and became a part of it, and by the mid-90s, coastal Norway was knocking on the door saying that this is something that looks really nice, we want to be a part of it. So going back to the program of regional cooperation, regional politics in the Nordic Council of Ministers, it was agreed to found NORA. So this is not very logical if you consider the politics in it. You have two autonomous territories with the Faroe Islands and Greenland. You have Iceland as a sovereign nation, and you have coastal Norway, which is, I don't know, neither. This was possible back then, and I think it's fair to say that in today's world, I'm not sure it will be possible to do this. But it was obviously driven by a desire to create results, to address issues, to address challenges in the communities, and to promote economic success in remote areas, in vulnerable areas, to bring in funding. The funding is not very big. It's about 1.4 million euros per year. That's our budget. So that's to fund the organization and the projects. It's small, but I think it's fair to say that we have reached quite some success over the years. A couple of years ago, there was an evaluation made on the organization, and it kind of ticked off all the right boxes. Am I doing for time?
I think we should round up and give the microphone to Tanya next to keep the regional aspect before we go into the more concrete examples.
Good morning. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Tanya. I work at the European Commission, more precisely in DG GROW, in a unit that deals with SMEs, and in particular late payments. I'll come back to that. In my introductory remarks, I'll just very briefly mention some of the things that the Commission is doing to help SMEs, which I understand, by the way, that sometimes I called SMBs. So we're talking about small and medium enterprises here, of course, and they are very dear to us because they are the beating heart of the EU economy, representing 99% of companies. And they are also the types of companies that create more jobs. They employ 2/3 of people in the private sector in the EU. And at first glance, things seem to be okay. We do annually an SME performance review to see how things are going for SMEs, how they are doing. And it actually shows a 1.8 job growth for SMEs in 2023. However, we also all know that the current economic context is difficult. There is brain drain. We are facing inflation, bankruptcies. And we also see in our SME performance review that SME productivity is actually declining. So SMEs need more people to produce a bit less output. For example, in Sweden, SME value added, so SME productivity basically, declined by 0.3 in 2023. In Denmark, it declined 2.8 in 2023. In Finland, SME employment declined by 0.6 and is expected to continue declining in 2024. And of course, we do not want this. On the contrary, as our just newly appointed Vice President Stéphane Séjourné said recently, we want our companies to be productive, to create jobs, to be sustainable, to innovate. So how do we do this? At the European Commission, we are putting forward many initiatives to help SMEs to do this. I will not have time to mention them all, but I would like to draw your attention to the SME relief package that has many measures, including, for example, a new proposal for simplifying taxes, to promote digitalization, also to enable access to skilled labor, for example, by recognizing qualifications of third country nationals, by promoting entrepreneurship amongst groups that are usually, not so common, with untapped potential, for example, women, young people. And we are also working very hard to improve liquidity of SMEs, not only through the EU funds that you probably are very much aware of, but also through legislation. And this brings me to late payments. Imagine you are a small company. For example, you're selling, parts to a windmill. You deliver your product, but then your client takes 2 months to pay you, which, by the way, is the EU average. 2 months. In some countries, we see 6 months delay to be paid. How do you survive without liquidity? You don't. You go bankrupt. And actually, 1 in 4 bankruptcies in Europe are due to companies not being paid in time. And so this lack of liquidity actually affects, in particular, SMEs, because we have seen, and there's data showing this, that it's actually large companies that usually pay late and small companies pay on time. So large companies are using small companies to have their own liquidity, to self-finance. So we currently have a law which is in council. It's a new regulation for late payments. We are proposing that everyone gets paid within 30 days, that there is monitoring, there is consequences if there are late payments. And of course, there's many other initiatives that I will not, of course, go into detail now, but I will be looking forward to our discussion later.
Thank you, Tanya. We will, in fact, go into the importance of liquidity when it comes to SMBs in the Arctic later and how important that is. But Helga, last but not least, you represent the companies here.
Yes, hello. My name is Helga Stina. I have a long name, but I will leave it at that. And I come from Iceland, and I am very happy to be here today. Thank you for inviting me for this panel. I have had the privilege to start a company in 3 countries, in Denmark, in the Netherlands, and in Iceland. And I have a travel company called Iceland Unwrapped, which is focusing on authentic experiences and getting people connected to each other. So that's basically what I try to do, both professionals and tourists. What I am interested in maybe discussing also today is regarding the sustainability of tourism, not only in Iceland but in the Arctic, because as we know, Europe is getting warmer in the summer, and tourists are wanting to travel to cooler places. So that is something that's very actual to us. Sustainability is difficult in Iceland. We are kind of in a mode of figuring things out as they come. And we have volcanic eruptions happening now frequently, and the innovation is incredible, how they are dealing with these issues, such as having a director of lava cooling, which is a new role in Iceland now, for those who want to manage the nature a bit with stopping the lava flow or moving it. So we are a very innovative country because we have to be, as we are, many of us in the Arctic. Yes, I don't know if I have anything more to add, but I'm very interested to be here because I think innovation, support, connection is the way forward to do things together and make it better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helga. So we've touched on some of the topics of interest here, which is, regional development, innovation, companies, liquidity. But of course, I think it's all within the framework of investments. And we know that in the Arctic, there is a challenge when it comes to investments. I mean, there is a bigger risk of venture capital to invest in companies in the north. There are challenging environments to adhere to. But there is also an issue of trust. I mean, how can we build trust in initiatives that are targeting the region, and how can we also make the link between local ownership and regional ownership to new investments and initiatives? And I think we should also explore a little bit about the future and how AI and digital tools can solve some of the issues when it comes to the lack of labor, resources and energy supply. But first, let's go to Aina and Sabrina to talk about some of the barriers and opportunities when it comes to innovation, business development, and regional collaboration in the Arctic. Your thoughts on that, please.
I can just start. If you start on the trust part, you have to get acceptance in the society you are in, kind of license to operate in this society. But then at the same time, you have to think about the acceptance capital or the trust capital that a small society have. Because if you have had a failed innovative business in your region that you had all your trust in. For instance, I think everybody have heard about Freyr, that they had to downscale in the north of Norway. That's a perfect example that makes it, they did all this job to get social acceptance, and they used a lot of the local community's social capital. So when they had to downscale, they kind of like air just went out of the balloon for the community. So if a new project is coming now and say they want to start a new project, the community don't have that much left to give. And that's a big problem. And we are trying to avoid that in our project, for instance, with Bodø International School. we are starting this IB school in Bodø, in the north of Norway. We only have one other IB school in all of the northern Norway. And I don't think in the Arctic that you have that many IB schools, because it's about building societies where a lot of people can live. And we can't be afraid of losing the people that already live there, but making good societies where you can choose to have an English school. So your family actually can move out. We don't, as a society, we shouldn't be that afraid of losing people. And we talk to a lot of businesses, hospitals, the universities are supporting this. We have both North University and we also have the UIT Arctic University in our city. So everybody was just supporting that we need an IB school for the children because we are losing specialists. We can't attract, we can't recruit specialists to this region because they don't take the chance on Bodø when they can't live there with their families. They can only come and stay for, say, 6 months to 2 years, and then they leave again. And it's expensive to constantly trying to recruit new people, so all the businesses kind of supported this. And then over to a part that is closely linked to social acceptance is the political environment, or the sphere is kind of merged into our society. Because we are kind of split in half. We have the left side with the Labour Party, and they are kind of based in the values of the Norwegian values that everybody should have access to everything from public services like schools and hospitals and doctors. And then, because they're based on that fact. And then we have the right side where we have the Conservative Party that's more open to private initiatives that can support the public system. And society is the same. We kind of get split because they are the same size in Norway. We also have a lot of other parties, but these are the big ones. And they're kind of strong in the north, especially between these two main parties. And when we were starting the process with Bodø International School, the Labour Party was in charge, and we got the support from the municipality. And now, when we are starting the actual process of building it, we have the Conservative Party. And you would think that wouldn't be a problem, because then you have both sides supporting you. But then you have small political cases pop up. Like now, when the Conservative Party took over the municipality, then the case of school structure in the municipality popped up. They had to take it, because the last period, they did something, but now they had to take the big consequences of budgeting in the municipality. So they are cutting down on school structure. And then instead of saying, we just do it, rip off the bandage, in January, they have pushed it out to December. Like 4 times have they pushed this school structure case that's splitting the society in two, to the right side and the left side. And we have so many theories that, the blue side or the right side is now in lead. They want everything to be privatized. They have made a secret agreement with the private school to buy one of the schools, and that's why our students, our kids have to be moved. And we have to face that in a critical phase when we are trying to establish a small school that don't compete with the public structure. And then we are back to the social acceptance. We had it, but you can also lose it as fast as you get it. And now we have to do what we can to kind of keep it. And it's difficult, but at the same time, that's society, that's democracy.
Yeah, I think you're also highlighting the political climate and how important that is to really see through initiatives and new initiatives in local communities in the north. And I think also your example of Freyr is a brilliant example of how geopolitical context and what happens outside of the Arctic is also impacting what is happening inside of the Arctic. But Sabrina, let's go to you, because I mean, when we talk about geopolitical context and need for instance, raw materials in the meeting with the green transition, the north of Sweden is really a prime example here. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and also about some of the barriers that Norrbotten has overcome in terms of business environment and investment?
I think everything started about 10 to 12 years ago when Facebook, or Meta as they are called nowadays, did their first international investment in Norrbotten, in Luleå, due to the fact that we have the green energy, and that has been the unique selling point and the driving force for us in Norrbotten and in northern Sweden, but also in northern Norway and Finland when it comes to the green transition projects. That is also a large challenge now, since we have so many projects at the same time that are market driven. That means also that we need to build the capacity to still have the green energy, and that means partly to build the capacity in northern Sweden on a short and a long run, but also build the capacity together with the northern parts of Finland and Sweden and Norway. And I think Sweden is not waiting that Norway and Finland will do the job for them, but that means also that there are a lot of business opportunities for the companies in northern parts to be part of this and also be there and build the capacity. And that is also something that we see within the construction site and branches. For example, when it's going down on the Finnish side, we have a lot of Finnish companies coming into Norrbotten and being some subcontractors in these big projects that we have. As it was mentioned, SMEs are the backbone of northern parts, even for us, even though they are a large international corporation also making of these large projects. So around 75% of those are industrial, and the rest are subcontractors and other projects connecting to this. And as it was lifted, it's also important to build the communities and have the trust and dialogue. We can see that the companies starting with the dialogue and having that kind of knowledge from the beginning and taking the dialogues are the ones that succeed. There are also ones that haven't succeeded, and that's often when they try to cut tracks and do things faster than it is supposed to be. And somewhere on the ground we also have this trust that everything builds on. We have long distances to each other geographically, we have long distances to global markets, but we know that we are few people living in the northern parts, and that also means that our strength is in cooperating, and we know that we are not attractive on a global scale if we don't cooperate with each other within the region, but also cross borders, especially with Finland and Norway. So I can see a lot of opportunities and challenges that we share in the northern parts of Arctic Europe, but also a lot of solutions that we can find together. As we were talking about the preparedness earlier, there's no point of everybody doing the same thing, but complementing each other makes us stronger together also. What comes to that point of course, the east-western connection is more and more important, not only for the foreign trade, but also for the geopolitics and security questions. So it has strengthened us and made us closer also after the pandemic that perhaps ripped us apart as it was.
I think that's a good stepping stone actually to end talking about collaboration over long distances. Greenland to the Norwegian coastline, I think that's about 2,000 kilometers. How do you see regional cooperation, even though over large distances, facilitate innovation and a sense of cohesive direction?
Thank you. First of all, I'm thinking about the idea of small and medium-sized businesses, because that's a matter of perception. We're talking about businesses starting with one person and not moving very fast upwards. We're talking very small entities here. So that's the ones that we are approaching. So it's very inclusive in that way. And another thing is the point of collaboration. We cannot fund any projects unless there is cooperation from partners representing at least 2 of the NORA countries. We like the idea of having all of them included. The topic or the subject doesn't always invite to it, but this is what we try to aim for. Could you repeat a little part of the question, please?
Yes, how does regional cooperation facilitate innovation?
Yeah, exactly, and the distances and everything. It might sound a bit illogical, but the basic idea is that if you consider the entire North Atlantic and Arctic area, all of us are presented with challenges and issues that are very particular to our region, as opposed to further down to the continent and indeed into the Nordic countries. So it's almost by nature that even though you're in Qaqortoq or Kirkenes or Tórshavn, you have people working very small, often isolated, dealing with issues at hand. Who understands you? Mm. You find these people primarily in this entire region, in the North Atlantic and Arctic region. So by having a network where you can actually tie in with others who are struggling with the same issues, the same questions, you'll find someone who you can actually work with. And this has proved successful over the years. Sometimes we have a person, a company, a small company, it can also be public institutions, approaching us with an idea they want to develop, because the projects that we are funding is also something, if you look on a timeline, we call it the pre-commercial phase. So if you're into production or if you're into marketing of something existing, that will not be something that we are able to fund. But yeah, I lost it again.
Well, I think that's an important point. Because from a funding perspective, what are your requirements for companies getting funding?
Yeah. The project needs to include, as I said, all the other parties. And we require very strictly that there is genuine cooperation. Mm. So it will not work if you have a partner on paper who is not either delivering or benefiting properly from the project.
Sustainability, is that a requirement as well?
It is written in stone in our strategy, so I mean the projects will have to comply with our basic requirements, although we do stretch them, because we have learned also very early in time that it is very important to be flexible and understanding about the issues, and say payments or you're not able to deliver on a timeline. Well, we engage in a discussion and reach to an understanding that why was it late, because of this and that, and we say, well, fine, you go ahead. I mean, this is our funding, and we are not expecting return, only that you work with it and produce the expected results, and if not, then why, and see how you can get even further. We operate with grants up to 500,000 Danish kroner. That's 67,000 euros per year. That's the maximum we can grant for a single project, and such a project can run up to 3 years, so 3 times that amount. And this will represent up to 50% of the budget. The budget can be higher, but it's pretty normal, it's around there. Sometimes we're approached with projects, suggestions that, you know, from really big companies, from an aquaculture company, they have an idea they want to develop, they want us to fund it. But then we go on the other side saying that, well, I mean, you are strong. You are strong, so I'm sorry, we will have to reserve our funds for someone a bit further down the line.
Right. Well, I think we'll follow the topic of SMBs and liquidity and what can be done in terms of being flexible to ensure liquidity. And I want to come to you, Tanya, to ask more about what the EU is doing in the Arctic specifically when it comes to providing flexibility solutions to companies and especially SMBs.
Thank you. So, as I said before, liquidity is really important in the Arctic, in the EU, everywhere. There are two things that might be interesting for you in case you haven't heard of it yet. It's the Enterprise Europe Network, so the EEN. It's the largest support network in the world, and it includes, you probably know about it, chambers of commerce, innovation agencies, and it basically aims at helping SMEs not only getting advice on how to get EU funds, so get more liquidity, but also on how to go global. And they have actually centers in Norway and in Sweden as well. So this is maybe one way of looking at it and ensure liquidity. Of course, the other way is by legislation, and this, of course, the European Commission is doing a lot for the EU, but that's a bit different, of course, from the Arctic. In addition to this, you might also want to look at the industrial clusters, and the European Commission supports this through the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. So these industrial clusters also exist, I think it's around 47 in Sweden and 40 in Finland. And they basically are groups of companies, universities, public authorities that work together. And they also can be a very useful resource to then access to EU funds or other funds, because they basically, you build synergies by working together. And this brings me a bit to the discussion that we're just having, that it's very important to collaborate, especially for SMEs, SMBs. You need a network to support you. We need to collaborate with each other, with the universities, with the government bodies. And again, liquidity is very much at the heart of this, as without liquidity, you go bankrupt, you don't, or you don't grow, you don't untap your potential.
Yeah, and we know that this is particularly an issue in the Arctic, and I think someone said in the last panel, accelerate, change or lose, and I think that very much applies to the businesses in the Arctic as well. Aina, you had a comment.
When we are talking about funding over here with Ernst and with Tanja, everything I can think about is in the Arctic, if you're getting funding, it's from the public or government or an initiative that's run by the government, and it's often strict restrictions on them, on who can get them. Ernst were just saying that if you're too strong, if your idea is too good, basically almost, that you can get quick money into your project because it's such a good idea, then you might not get funding. And that's a problem in the Arctic, that you always kind of have to have the incentives from Big Brother, from the South, from Europe, from Horizon, from all these initiatives. But we don't have big enough companies or bodies up in the Arctic that can give the money. We don't have the capital located in the Arctic. And that's also a problem for kind of feeling used. You're afraid of being the losing end as personal, that, I kind of voted yes for this. And it turns out that this is a bad investment, and you're afraid that all the people in the South is going to laugh at you because you can't do what they can. So the private funds or private capital is a problem. But how to turn it is a bit hard, because we are dependent on all these initiatives that is from different government bodies. Yeah, that was the comment.
Yeah. Okay, a quick comment from Ernst before I go to Helga-Stina.
Just picking really quickly up on this, I mean, we are definitely not holding back on good ideas, that's for sure. We are always, we are there to lose our money, basically. So just to make that clear.
So, Helga-Stina.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, as I said before, I started a company in Denmark and in Netherlands, and then I moved it to Iceland when I moved to Iceland back after 16 years. And the difference of starting companies in these two countries was very huge. Also in terms of information, transparency of support and funding, and network. I am a network person, so I just go and I jump into the networks. But people maybe who are not networking people, they struggle with this as entrepreneurs in Iceland with the small businesses, that they feel left alone. And because we have a tourist boom, we have a lot of people, a lot of tourists coming in, then it's kind of thought, yeah, let's just, that will be fine, they'll be fine. But then when you have some kind of a crisis like COVID and, or a volcanic eruption where people start to cancel, then the infrastructure isn't really ready for sustaining these businesses. So that's concerning.
Yeah, good point. I want to engage the audience a bit. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. But I will first just go quickly again to Helga-Stina, because we have talked about the importance of innovations and businesses in the Arctic being sustainable. Your business is very much sustainable. Can you talk a little bit about how can you ensure that a company remains sustainable in, you know, not just in the environmental term, but also in the social and economic term, in an environment that maybe isn't always conducive of a sustainable practice?
I think this is very, it depends a little bit on the persons, I think. I think you have to be a little bit mad to be an entrepreneur in Iceland, because the risk analysis is huge. And I think that we, what I have been seeing since I moved back 4 years ago is that the bigger companies are now buying out the smaller companies in some of the regions that have built up infrastructure and tourism, and really nice tourism, because I work with the smaller units, so I'm not very happy about this. And that is concerning, that the sustainability is difficult for these small businesses because of funding, as I said, and because of security in the flow of business coming in. So that is one point, that there seems to be, as I experience it, is of course my experience that the bigger companies are buying the smaller ones, taking the authenticity a little bit out of the travel business, because I, in my opinion, think we should be focusing on authentic, that we stand for authentic environment and smaller units. That's one point. Mm. Did that answer the question? Yeah?
Absolutely, and that comes back to the issue of trust and social acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but let's turn to the audience. We had a couple of questions. Yes, you, in the purple shirt. Do we have any microphones? Incoming.
Thank you very much. I'm Irene from TNGO. Talking about SMEs and connecting to the opening keynote speech that was done this morning about the damage of the ceiling ban, what is the EU, DG GROW, and other organizations and institutions are doing to revive small businesses in the sector? I know that there's a indigenous exemption, but this hasn't stopped indigenous communities from being negatively impacted by the ban. Thank you.
Who wants to take that?
Well, as I was saying, there's a lot of initiatives going on. I mean, it's not, and coming back also to what was being said in the panel, is not only about financing, it's also setting the right legislation and the right framework for businesses, SMEs, to develop. And for that, for example, the European Commission has been doing a lot in terms of training, in terms of building networks for, you know, groups of untapped potential, for example, women, young people. There is now, for example, the Erasmus for entrepreneurs, which has been a huge success in terms of numbers applying. There's the European skills agenda, because basically what we need to do is to also train the future businesses, the people who will, like some of you here, have opened a business. We need to train them and to make them open to also see which opportunities are there. And for that, you need digital skills, you need management skills. So we do a lot on that. We also do a lot on the funding. And as I said, there's also a lot on legislation. So I think the answer to the question is never one-fold. You need the context that makes you then be bold, because sometimes you do need to be bold to open a business and then scale up. And of course, the internal market has untapped potential. I mean, the internal market means that you have so many companies and so many consumers that are there for you. And if you manage to scale up, if you use the networks available, and if you have the right legislation also in place, you will be able to scale up and profit from the internal market benefits. Hopefully, I have replied partially to your question.
Thank you, Tanya. Ernst?
Very good question, I think. Thank you. About NORA, we are a project funding program, as I said, but we have two other components. One is to be agenda setting, and one is to be alliance building. On the agenda setting scene, we had a project, we initiated a project back in 2017 or 18 called the Blue Fashion Challenge. I don't know if any of you heard about it. It became quite big at the time. The idea was that we have the vast ocean, obviously, in common. We have nature, and we have a number of underutilized resources, perfectly sustainable and green and all the good things. So the idea was, why not take this into the second most polluting business on earth, fashion? So very simply, we invited designers from all the Nordic countries to take part in a competition in Tórshavn, where they got 3 days to create a collection, with sealskin, with fish skin, with some fabric that was based on seaweed, basically, and products that are, natural. We had an issue to begin with because some of the designers were sensitive to the subjects that they were dealing with, ethic issues. But to make a long story short, I mean, they all went back thinking and returned on the other side saying that, this is the right thing to do. So this was an amazing achievement. The competition was a success. There were some nice collections made. They were presented in Malta in a big EU conference there, later in Copenhagen, and later again in Rome. But there was an issue. You couldn't show the collection with the sealskin. So already there was something. But, I mean, it was mentioned on the cover of Vogue magazine, so it really did go far. But maybe the timing wasn't right, but at least we put this on the agenda, so addressing this particular issue in a very tangible way.
Very good, thank you. We had a question over here, and then Rasmus next.
Thank you very much. Algirdas Razauskas from the Secretariat of the
Can you speak up, please?
Speak up? Yes, I can. I try. Secretariat of European Parliament, Algirdas Razauskas. So a question in particular probably to Sabrina. So if I'm not mistaken, Northvolt is going bankrupt in Norrbotten. Could you tell a bit more about this experience? Whether any warning signs? What is it like? What are you talking inside? What could be the impact for your branding as a... Thank you.
Yes, thank you. First, geography lesson. Northvolt is situated in Västerbotten. That's the next northernmost area under Norrbotten in northern part of Sweden. So it's not my region, but I also represent the North Sweden European office that covers the 4 northernmost areas in Sweden. That is around 50% of the total area. So I'm quite familiar, and we also work a lot with the chamber in Västerbotten, so I know the situation. I would say it's just one project of the green transition. It's not the bubble that has gone away or have destroyed the green transition. It's just one company. It's a big startup company with issues with liquidity and financing, as any other startup company would have. Quite a good example of what happens often with startups, especially in northern parts. It hasn't actually affected that much our companies in Norrbotten, that is the northernmost area. We have a couple of companies that were subcontractors and subcontractors. So our companies in Norrbotten actually had divided their risks also as subcontractors. And if we compare to, for example, Stekra, that is the H2 Green Steel former in Norrbotten project, that means also that they have started to divide the risk in a way that they require that their subcontractors also only have, for example, 20 or 30% of their annual turnover in their project. So to be able to minimize the risks for the small and medium-sized companies and other subcontractors that come from there. That's actually a model that Nokia used in ICT in Uleåborg in Oulu in Finland, that actually grew the ICT sector in Finland that is really strong in the northern part. So there are a lot of learnings. Northvolt is the first project that has gone further than the other ones, and we are learning a lot from them what comes to the building housing and building communities and so on, how to attract global talents and so on. However, the Swedish states perhaps didn't actually be that good in taking care of the talents that were at Northvolt that had to quit now. So that's kind of a sad thing for us in Norrbotten, that we couldn't keep all the talents and that the legal requirements and so on aren't really there to be able to be flexible between companies when it comes to this kind of bankruptcies or other reconstructions and so on. But hopefully that will also be a learning and lead to something good going forward what comes to the immigration question and global talents for Sweden. I think both Norway and Finland has been more progressive what comes to making it easier for global talents to come there. So there's a lot of media around Northvolt, of course, and they have probably doing projects in different countries at the same time that also resulted the result that is there now. But what comes to the projects of the total volume in investments in 1,450 billion kronas, that's just a small part of it. So the other projects are ongoing and most of them are market driven, and that's also the difference towards if we look at historically the projects that has been tried in northern Sweden and hasn't succeeded, they often have been more political initiatives, and this time is a market driven. It's private companies that are investing and have interest in investing both in the companies but also the societies. However, I think we could also be better in requiring to them to invest even more from the beginning. So that's perhaps also a learning for us in Norrbotten for all the projects that is ongoing, that we actually need help building infrastructure, building housing, building the communities and the public service. Also that of course is a vital part for the people to stay and work in the Arctic.
Thank you, Sabrina, for elaborating on the case of Northvolt, which I think is a good example of some of the opportunities, but also some of the challenges that Arctic businesses and Arctic investment can face. And I think a lesson learned for other people. Rasmus, you had a question.
Yes, Rasmus Bertelsen from UIT. Thank you for a very interesting panel. I want to bring up the topic of brain circulation, so that people travel for education, for experience, they return home or they go somewhere else and maybe they return home at some point. And in my view, Icelandic and Faroese society has benefited enormously from brain circulation. Ernst and I, we know each other for many years, and I know your international background, Ernst. And Helga, you just told about your international experience. There's the Icelandic term að sigla, to sail, which means to travel for education and come home. And in my view, it's the basis of the level of development, human development in both Iceland and the Faroe Islands. And I would also claim that you cannot create innovative, competitive organizations on regions without a high level of mobility. And in northern Norway, I'm very concerned about this fixation on keeping people. Because if they leave, they're lost forever. And I hear a lot of talk about keeping people and attracting others. And I don't think it's healthy for communities, I don't think it's healthy for organizations if you have, locals and outsiders. So I think for the North, brain circulation is absolutely key. We have to be much, much better at getting our own people out in the world and getting them back again. And I mean, I see former students, I see Norwegian colleagues with international background, I see how much they struggle to get back on the North Norwegian labor market. UIT hires international or Norwegian academics who bring a foreign spouse, well educated, who really struggles to get into the local labor market. So my question to you is, how do we get brain circulation going, and how do we make northern public-private academic employers wake up, smell the coffee, and acknowledge foreign education, foreign experience? Thank you.
Good question. Who wants to tackle that one? Sabrina and Aina.
I might use myself as an example. I'm born and raised in Finland, in southern part, but done my university studies in Norrbotten, in Luleå. And then I've traveled around to Uppsala, Stockholm, to France and Canada and Finland, and back to Luleå. And I'm living there now since 2009. So I think a lot of that interest of coming back is also to having interesting workplaces and interesting opportunities that we have right now with all the investments. But it's also about finding your place in the community, to networking and connecting, finding these places. For me, it was a dance school that actually connected and created my friends from the beginning. So it's really getting part of the networks. And in Norrbotten, I think one of the challenges is often the language. If you can't speak Swedish, it's much harder. And we have some SMEs that are actually cooperating when they attract global talents. We have a lot of companies with a lot of different nationalities, and they also know that when the other person joining with the employee gets job or finds its place in the community, then they stay. So they are actually helping each other to find work also for the respective part that is following with them. And also seeing the circulation as a benefit for the whole region, that if I can keep a global talent for 5 years, like a hockey player or a basketball player, it's a really good investment for my company. And if that person goes to another company in Norrbotten and stays still there, it's really a win for us all in the region. And I would actually like to see a test region where we have this free movement of people and also companies between our countries in northern parts of Finland, Sweden and Norway. We have the perfect legal structure to actually do more together and find regulations that comply instead of building hinders that actually make it harder for the employees to find new opportunities. So I think in a global context we are also more attractive as a Arctic Europe region or the northern region than if we try to find all the talents on our own in respective region or municipality even. So from that point of view, it's much smarter for us also to work together, but that requires also that our national legislation and EU legislation allows us to make that kind of region where the movement and mobility is much easier than it is today, even though we have it quite a lot already today.
Yeah, thank you. And the importance of making a community conducive of a life lived outside of work as well, outside of the workplace. Aina, and then Helga-Stina.
I'm just going to keep on what you were saying. As I started this conversation with, is that we shouldn't be so afraid of people moving away. We need that people want to move away, but also want to move back home. We can't have universities everywhere. We can't have certain businesses everywhere. We are where we're at, and we have to know that. But at the same time, we have to make it easier for people to move away. So the barrier for actually moving to a place also gets smaller. For the second you get it, let's say it's easier to move away, or you get more opportunities, and then you can move back later. If it's easier to move away, it's a bigger chance that someone want to take an opportunity to just try out the community that you're in. So for Bodø International School, that makes it easier for a lot of families that want international careers for themselves or for the children to move out of the region, but at the same time it opens doors for other people that want to move to the region and want this offer. And what was the other part of the question?
I think that was it. How do you ensure that people move back? You answered that.
Oh, ensuring that people move back. Yeah, for businesses, we need to have certain jobs in the region that we are. And one of the things that Norway is quite bad at is just publicly announce that you can apply for a job. Because it's easier to just hire a friend. And that's a big problem. And we see a generational shift in a lot of businesses, but it's still ongoing. But some business owners kind of tell me they are a little bit far up in the years, and they've been a business owner for 50 years. It's a family-owned business. And they tell me, well, all the youth are just lazy. They don't want to apply for the job. And I'm like, but have you put your position out on the open market? No. How can you say that they're lazy when they don't want to come to you? So it's just small steps to kind of turn from in the market. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you for this comment and this question, because I think it's a big thing. I think it's key to the future and how we're working in the world and in the Arctic. When I started my company 9 years ago in the Netherlands, my husband had a job in the Netherlands, and I was decided to run away from the laundry and use my education and get connected to other women, start a startup like a community space to work together. And I think that's kind of what is needed to be empowered when people move to a place. Because we cannot have educated or people who really want to work not working. I think that's a humanity right violation. But on the other hand, I think in my business, for example, I need a computer and a coffee machine, and I work with entrepreneurs all around the world, Icelanders as well, and I think that is also important to have in mind, because you can't have universities everywhere, like you said, or you can't have everything everywhere, and we don't need it. But we can be connected in such a big level like that, and people can contribute to the community that they come from, even though they are based in Argentina, for example. So I think that's also important to look at in the future. But this is not going to, because this is not going to be changing. This is going to be more and more in the future, that people are going to be working in other places than they live, for example. Thank you.
Tanya, you had a comment as well.
Thank you. Very quickly, brain circulation is indeed extremely important also for the EU. And I mean, again, here I think you need to put in place the right legislation, for example, by recognizing diplomas as we're currently doing, recognizing the professions, making equivalent associations of professions and everything. And also by promoting, I'll be very brief, and also by promoting from the very young stage a mobility. So Erasmus for entrepreneurs, for example, and this of course could also be applied in the Arctic to a different scale. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I think we have time for one quick question in the back here. Blue shirt.
not sure how quick it is. So my question is about, you mentioned a couple of times, Adam Stempin, Arctic Center, University of Lapland. Thanks for a great panel. My question is about this east-west interactions and connections that you mentioned a couple of times. I wanted to ask, how do you see them being valid, being useful, and the character of those that need to be supported. And it's a bit challenging for me. I also in the past wrote reports and recommendations that we should have these transborder clusters and try to improve the east-west connectivity in all sorts of ways. But when you talk with companies, they often say that yes, it's really nice to talk with other people because they have the same approach. You learn from them. The best practices, learning about best practices is great. It's not so great when it comes to actually having cooperation on the business level, actually having joint ventures, actually doing business together, that they always end up that 99% of their business is north-south rather than east-west, I mean, for our part of Europe and the Arctic. So I just wanted to ask you, like, how do you see this potential for, I don't know, for cross-border border clusters? Which industries are kind of susceptible? Should the public, should the EU, should the Nordic states promote these kind of cross-border east-west interactions and joint ventures between companies, or maybe that's, you know, a bit of a waste of money instead of putting for something else? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. Aina and then Sabrina.
I can not answer it, but try to answer out on some of it. The east-west. In Norway, Sweden, Finland, we have a lot of minerals, for instance. That is good for Europe. And if you look at trains, for instance, that we already talked about, we have one train line going up Norway, south to north, and it stops in Bodø. And the next one goes from Narvik and all the way through Sweden to Finland. And it's quite far up, and that's really important to have transporting basically minerals to get them out until the mines. But we also, that's a good way also to get connected to Europe and the rest of the world. So we have a lot of opportunities there, and also electricity, because we are starting to talk about like a flexi solution, that not everything has to be chained down to one business, but if one business can use the electricity from, say, 5 to 12, the next from 12 to 16, and the last one from 16 to 12 at night, then you have, then we don't need to produce that much electricity. We can kind of share it in a different way than we have before, and that opportunity is closer for us in Bodø with Sweden almost than it is with us and Tromsø, for instance. So then it's kind of easier for us to connect us to Sweden, and we can get some electricity from Sweden, and we can give some electricity back, because we don't have the technology at the moment for battery charge up of all the electricity that we at the moment have. I'm going to give it over, and we can get some other perspectives.
Very good. I think that also plays into the infrastructure discussion that we were touching on earlier. But
I would say that infrastructure in east-western way up north is vital for us. As I mentioned earlier, the iron ore line that goes from Luleå to Narvik, it transports 50% of the total tonnage in Sweden of goods. And as I mentioned earlier, 90% of the iron ore is extracted in Norrbotten that is used within EU. So we are vital for the global value chain, and our infrastructure is vital for that. We need the harbor in Narvik that doesn't freeze, and we need also the harbor in Luleå and the smaller harbors on the Swedish and Finnish side to complement each other, since they have different expertise areas, so to say. And for us, the EU funding is vital. The TEN-T corridor, the core harbors are something that actually made our infrastructure possible. The iron ore line is actually 120 years old, so it needs to be modernized and reinforced. And right now we are hoping that the NATO membership and the geopolitical situation actually will connect us more between Finland, Sweden and Norway in northern parts. What comes to civil preparedness, but also the military, and that will probably both help our roads and train connections especially, but harbors and also flights are of course very important for us. So the intermodality and transports are the key for our trade, but also for our people to be able to connect and do business with each other up north. So for us it's more common to do business north from the east-western side than the north south side. If look, we are also more alike from the business perspective up north, and we function with the trusts as it was mentioned earlier.
Super. Thank you so much. So our time is up, but I want to just ask each and one of you to provide a quick call to action or take-home message before we conclude. Let's start with you, Tanya.
Well, I think for me...
Super quick.
Cooperation networks use it. To scale up, it is essential. EN, industrial clusters, the internal market, meetings with other businesses, with other women, and use it to scale up.
Excellent. You have to do your research. Are you going to put money in the Arctic, or do you want to have a project in the Arctic? You have to do your research on what has happened, the social structure, the trustness of what have happened just before you, like historically, is something similar to your project, and why didn't that work? And 2, are you willing to break the market you are in now so that you can make a new market with a new structure and then also innovate the market to be more sustainable? Is also a question I want you to think about.
I would probably say, as the Finns say, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. But I think a lot of the opportunities that we have in the Arctic Europe and northern parts of Sweden, Finland and Norway are opportunities. Even the challenges is something that we can actually find a common and joint solutions for. But for us, EU is really the key. It's here in Brussels that the Arctic is understood and the joint strategies are strengthened. So I think we need to find more ways of making action and not just talking about it.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think it's important to talk together and to cooperate, because we are facing the same challenges, and we can learn from each other. We don't have to invent the wheel, if you say that in English, I don't know. I think also it's important that we are authentic in, for example, because I talk on behalf of my business, which is a tourism business, to be authentic and not to be afraid of being authentic and respectful in the areas that you are working in. Meaning that you have to have sustainable approaches to flow of tourists, for example, and how we manage that is super important, especially now when I hear about the airport in Greenland, for example. And my first thought was like, oh no, my God, they have to, take it very seriously how they manage the flow of people, because in Iceland we are dealing with 2 million tourists a year in a country of 400,000 people. And the infrastructure is struggling, and there is some challenges there. There are really good things happening as well, but this is a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Norway is a very small player in all this. The money is small and the operations are pretty small, but still we believe that where there are challenges, like we have the North Atlantic and Arctic, it's always been like that, but we've always been forced to see the opportunities and move forward into action. So this is something that we're trying to promote and encourage. For instance, we encourage, spend our money on meeting, get together, get to understand each other and talk about the issues. This is a very important aspect of our operations. Of course, there's a lot more to be said, but it is really one of the key messages. It's the people here. The people are a lot more connected than you might think on an everyday basis.
Super. I think that's an...
If I can just... I have a few copies of this one. It contains some stories about some successes. So if you're interested...
Great. Thank you so much. I think that's an excellent note to conclude on. The meeting places, we are here to meet each other and have conversations. So thank you to the organizers for arranging this as a meeting place and a platform. Thank you to the audience for your questions and your attentiveness. And then thank you, not least, to the panelists for this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. That makes noise. Thank you, Ms. Delbecq and the panelists for this interesting panel. And also thank you for Michael for guiding the discussions this morning. Much appreciated. The previous panel is actually a very good transition to our the next part of the program, which is the Laurence Strand Arctic Futures Award. As a reminder, this award was set up 3 years ago by the International Polar Foundation together with Mrs. and Mr. Tran that we have the honor to have with us today. It's a prize money to support entrepreneurship in the Arctic. It's a prize money, but it's also the winners. Sorry, the winners can also rely on our network, on visibility, not only the network and the support of the foundation, but also of the partners that I have mentioned yesterday in the beginning of the symposium. I will not today announce the winner, but I invite Patty Bruns, Secretary General of the Arctic Mayors Forum, to join me on stage to give us a bit more flavor, a bit more background about the award. And then also we will invite, after that, we will invite Ms. Tran to hand over the prize. Patty, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It is afternoon. The Laurence Tran Arctic Futures Award recognizes startups that embody innovation, sustainability, and a commitment to the Arctic. This year, we had 8 impressive applications from Arctic startups representing 6 Arctic states, addressing sectors such as housing, food waste in restaurants, food sustainability, ocean innovation, air quality, traceability of supply chain materials, healthcare, tourism, and youth engagement in communities. There is truly some impressive work being done by young startups in the Arctic. I was very pleased to serve on a jury under the guidance of Joseph Cheek and Nicholas Van Hoek from the International Polar Foundation, and I would just like to take a moment to call out my fellow jury members, who included Erica Dye, Project Manager from G-Beta, located in Alaska, Mads Fredriksson, Director of the Arctic Economic Council, located in Norway, Felicia Punasiri, Regional Manager of the Norrbotten Federation of Business Owners, located in Sweden, Gorm Vold, Project Manager of Nalik Ventures, located in Greenland, and Maria Vuorensola, Project Manager of Business Oulu in Finland. And apologies in advance for anybody's name or location that I happen to mispronounce. I would also like to share with you how we evaluate these evaluations when they come in. And we really do this based on 5 criteria, and we go through a ranking process individually and then discuss as a committee. And the 5 criteria are sustainability. So how does the startup align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Is it advancing green transition and conserving natural resources for future generations? What is the relevance of the startup to Arctic communities? How does this startup benefit the local people, and does it empower people and include and strengthen resilience? Innovativeness. Is the idea revolutionary or disruptive? How does it break new ground in addressing Arctic challenges? And maturity. Can the startup scale up its activities beyond its current setting, and is it prepared to grow broader? And finally, how will the award impact the startup? Will it allow it to do the scaling up? Is it meaningful? And will tangible process be seen by the startup in the near future? Together, these criteria ensure that we spotlight startups making a significant and sustainable difference in the Arctic's future. And while we could only have one winner of the award, the jury would like to call out two honorable mentions. The first is Air Vitalize, based in Anchorage, Alaska. Air Vitalize has created a compact mobile unit called the Vita 1.0 that is a decentralized outdoor air filtration system that improves air quality in public spaces and indeed helps the environment. The Vita 1.0 is energy efficient, it is available, or it has the ability to run on solar and is customizable to local realities. The second is Sula Care, founded by Maria Steinfjell, a Sami woman and nurse who encountered challenges with the quality of urinary catheter insertion in female patients. Sula Care's device is designed to free up one of the nurse's hands, allowing a single nurse to perform the procedure independently. This is particularly important in rural communities where the number of healthcare professionals are indeed limited. The goal is to enhance the safety, quality, and efficiency of urinary catheterization in women by supporting infection control, improving patient comfort, and simplifying the procedure for healthcare workers. On behalf of the jury, I would like to congratulate our honorable mentions and encourage them to apply in future years for the prize. Now, on to the announcement of the winner of the Laurence Tran Arctic Futures Award. Could I please ask that Mrs. Tran and Pete Steele join me on the stage? Okay. Oh, is this one? It's working. Sure. Yeah. Mrs. Tran is going to say a few words about the award before we announce the winner. Go ahead. Okay. You can stand on the stage.
First of all, congratulations to your Sioux tissue for winning the third Laurence Tran Arctic Award. This prize was created around 40 years ago when our daughter died in Brussels. And this prize was reserved for young writers. It was a literary prize, writing books on solidarity, defending freedom, and also approaching cultures. Then the prize changed 3 years ago and became the Laurence Tran Arctic Future. Our family, and on my behalf of my husband, who is now 96 years ago, sorry, 96 years, I say that we are very happy and proud to offer this prize to the project of Sioux Tissue, focus on education and training and social integration for young people in Arctic countries. We wish you a big success in your project and development, helping young people to have help, dreams, and hope in their future. And then perhaps one day we will come and visit you in the far north country. And good luck.
Indeed. Thank you, Mrs. Tran, very much. And Perhaps I'll get Mrs. Tran and Mr. Steele just to take and Nicholas, if you'd like to just.
No, I would just like to make sure that we hand over the trophy and the frames.
So without further ado, I would like to say a little bit more about our winner this year. It is my privilege to announce, along with the Tran family and Mr. Steele, that this year's winner of the Laurence Tran Futures Award goes to Siu Tiu, a remarkable organization that embodies the spirit of this award. Siu Tiu is not just a name, it means future in both West Greenlandic and East Greenlandic dialects, a fitting representation of the mission to create brighter futures for youth in Greenland. As Greenland's first socioeconomic enterprise, Siu Tiu addresses a pressing issue. Up to 20% of young people in Greenland drop out of education after the 10th grade. This initiative tackles the challenges faced by the most marginalized youth, many from low-income families with limited educational opportunities, by guiding them into employment and education. Siu Tiu transforms lives through practical, community-focused work. From building bridges and benches to planting trees and clearing snow, these young colleagues not only learn valuable skills, but also rediscover their purpose and self-worth. Over 55 people have already benefited from this effort, creating ripple effects of positive change in Tassalak and Kakratak. Again, apologies on the names. But Siu Tiu's impact does not stop at the local level. Their vision offers a blueprint for similar efforts across the Arctic, proving that with the right partnerships, understanding of community needs, this model can thrive anywhere. Today, we celebrate Siu Tiu's groundbreaking achievements with the Laurence Tran Futures Award and a grant of €7,500. May this award fuel your inspiring work and ensure that no young person feels left behind in pursuit of a brighter future. I would now like to invite Pilo Samuelson from Siu Tiu up onto the stage to accept this award and to say a few words. Join me in congratulating Pilo.
You want me to help you with your awards? Because
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
there you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. I would like to say a few words. This has been a team effort. And I wish that everyone involved in this project would have the opportunity to be with me here on stage today. As circumstances are, that's not possible. I know they're with me, and I know that they can't wait to share this fantastic news with everyone back home. On behalf of Siu Tiu, Qoyana, thank you for this award. We feel incredibly grateful and honored. It's difficult to describe the impact for everyone involved in our business because we're not doing this alone. We feel that with this award, we can raise the attention of socioeconomic enterprises, not only in Greenland, but also in the Arctic. This is also a recognition and validation of the effort that my colleagues work on every day. And I can assure that it will also boost
our motivation to continue our work, and guide us toward our vision of a community with room for everyone. Socioeconomic enterprises has proven to be a very effective and powerful way to reach young people that Patty described. And we feel that this model, this scheme, might prove valuable and meaningful in other places of the Arctic. I have so much more to say, but I'm truly humbled. I'm very grateful. Thank you for this award to your family and to the.
Take some pictures, maybe. Just times for some pictures, maybe, and then. Hold on for the pictures. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tran. Congratulations again. Congratulations to the winner again. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for lunch. We reconvene here at 1:30, correct? Yes, 1:30. Thank you very much.
Minus